Welcome to my channel. In my channel, you can watch various type of fiction and fantasy audiobook. If you want more video like this, please subscribe my channel.
Konoha. My Pokemon ninjutsu is too overpowered. Part 2. Nawaki observed the flow of the battle, his mind working rapidly. He noticed that while Mewtwo's barrier was powerful, there was a brief moment of energy reorganization after every successful defense. Nawaki began forming hand seals. Wind release. Great breakthrough. A powerful gust of air erupted from his mouth. While it couldn't harm Mewtwo directly, it successfully disrupted the surrounding airflow, causing a momentary instability in Mewtwo's hovering posture. Mewtwo glanced at Nawaki with a hint of surprise, clearly not having anticipated that this human could use such an ability. Mew seized the opportunity, its eyes blazing bright, and a powerful, psychic, attack struck Mewtwo directly. Mewtwo hastily raised its arm to block, was knocked back several meters, and a flash of annoyance crossed its eyes. Annoying insect. Mewtwo raised its hand, aimed at Nawaki, and a shadow ball instantly formed. Earth release. Earth-style wall. Nawaki quickly formed the hand seals, and a wall of earth rose from the ground, shielding him. The shadow ball struck the earth wall with a tremendous roar. The wall crumbled, but Nawaki had already used the moment to shift to a different position. Nawaki's strategy was crystal clear. Avoid a direct confrontation with Mewtwo, instead constantly harassing and distracting it to create openings for Mew to attack. Ninja Art. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Tsunaki formed the hand seals, and 3 shadow clones approached Mewtwo from different directions. Mewtwo watched the clones indifferently, its psychic power spreading out like ripples, instantly destroying all of them. But in that instant, Tsunaki's real body, using the clones as cover, had quietly approached Mewtwo's flank and rear. Sealing technique. Bind. A talisman appeared in Tsunaki's hand, and he pressed it precisely onto Mewtwo's shoulder. The talisman unfolded on Mewtwo's shoulder, forming a black inscription that temporarily restrained Mewtwo's movements. Now, Tsunaki shouted. Mew understood, immediately gathering all its strength to launch a powerful, shadow ball, directly at the temporarily restrained Mewtwo. Mewtwo broke free from the restraint at the last moment, but it was too late to completely dodge, and the shadow ball grazed its body, eliciting a low groan. Mewtwo's gaze turned completely cold. It was clearly enraged by Tsunaki's continuous harassment. You have successfully gained my attention, human. Mewtwo's voice carried chilling murderous intent. Meanwhile, the Pokémon below were undergoing a far more complex emotional impact. Pikachu faced its clone but did not engage in battle like the other Pokémon. It looked at the replica, identical to itself yet filled with hostility, and slowly shook its head. Pikachu, it called softly, its familiar black eyes filled with sadness rather than fighting spirit. The clone Pikachu paused, then assumed an attack stance, the electric sacs on its cheek sparking with dazzling electricity. However, the original Pikachu simply stood still, even taking a step forward and extending its tiny yellow paw. Multiple Shadow Clone Jutsu. Although Tsunaki's hand seals couldn't summon clones on the scale of Naruto's, over 20 clones still surged forth, wrapping around Mewtwo. A flicker of disgust crossed Mewtwo's eyes, and a powerful psychic force erupted, blasting the approaching shadow clones away. But Tsunaki's objective was achieved. He had once again created a precious window of opportunity for Mew to attack. Mew transformed into Mewtwo's likeness, conjuring a psychic lightsaber identical to Mewtwo's, and launched a fierce close-quarters assault. The 2 psychic lightsabers clashed in the air, erupting in blinding light and energy shockwaves. Tsunaki continuously moved along the edge of the battlefield, sometimes using wind release to disrupt Mewtwo's senses, sometimes using earth release to alter the terrain and restrict Mewtwo's movement, and even occasionally throwing shuriken and kunai to draw Mewtwo's attention. Although these attacks caused no substantial damage to Mewtwo, the continuous harassment definitely disrupted Mewtwo's combat rhythm. Mewtwo was forced to divert some of its attention to deal with Tsunaki's interference, which gave Mew more opportunities to attack. You are truly annoying, Mewtwo said to Tsunaki during a brief lull in the exchange. Tsunaki smiled slightly. This is called strategy. Didn't you want to witness different possibilities? Moving scenes were unfolding among the various battle pairings below. Bulbasaur's vine whip intertwined with its clones, but instead of pulling hard, it relaxed the tension. The clone Bulbasaur looked at it confusedly, unsure how to react. Squirtle, facing its replica, suddenly made an unexpected move. It pulled out its sunglasses and offered them to the being that looked exactly like itself. The clone Squirtle was stunned, its attacking motion suspended midair. The most touching sight was Meowth and its replica. Instead of fighting fiercely like the other Pokémon, they sat side by side on a collapsed boulder, gazing up together at the clouds illuminated by the energy spheres in the sky. Although the clone Meowth couldn't speak human language like the original, a silent understanding seemed to have been reached between them. Mewtwo's gaze was repeatedly drawn to these scenes. It saw Pikachu's clone slowly lower the hand prepared to release an electric shock, and saw Bulbasaur's Vine Whip change from an attack to a gentle touch. Although these replicas were copied and modified from the originals, possessing distinct personalities, at this moment, they displayed the same independent spirit as their counterparts. When the castle began to collapse, the situation became even more chaotic. A massive rock simultaneously crashed down toward Pikachu and its clone. In the nick of time, both Pikachus spontaneously released an electric shock, shattering the boulder. They exchanged a look, the previous hostility in their eyes having vanished. Witnessing all this, Mewtwo suddenly unleashed a powerful psychic shockwave, attacking the entire area indiscriminately. Tsunaki quickly formed hand seals, ninja art, hidden shadow snake hands. Several snakes shot out from his sleeve-covered arms, wrapping around nearby pillars and anchoring him, saving him from being blown away by the shockwave. Ash and the others hid behind their Pokémon, barely managing to withstand the attack. The battle entered its climax. Mewtwo was clearly tired of the continuous harassment and decided to use its full power. It raised its hands high, beginning to condense an immensely huge energy sphere. It was the culmination of all its psychic energy, the decisive blow. Opposite it, Mew, transformed into Mewtwo, made the same motion. Two energy spheres capable of destroying the island formed in their hands, about to collide. Stop! Ash, finding courage from who knows where, suddenly rushed into the empty space between the two. Ash! Tsunaki cried out in alarm, trying to grab him but it was too late. Ash stood between Mewtwo and Mew, looking up at them. Stop this. This kind of fighting is meaningless. The original Mewtwo's gaze was icy. Move aside, human. Mew, transformed into Mewtwo, also silently watched the human boy below, offering no reaction. Tsunaki's voice suddenly echoed through the desolate ruins. The form of life doesn't matter, what matters is what kind of being you choose to become. This sentence clearly struck a chord with Mewtwo. The energy sphere in its hand trembled slightly. Tsunaki slowly walked forward and continued, you were created, yes. But the you now has your own thoughts, your own choices. You can completely decide your own path, so why cling to your origins? Mewtwo fell silent. The energy sphere in its hand was still rotating, but its speed had visibly decreased. Tsunaki looked at Mewtwo with firm eyes. You are unique. There is only one you in the world. Just like me and my Pokémon, we are all different individuals, and that is precisely what makes us precious. He paused, then continued, you call yourself a copy, but in my eyes, you are a brand new, unique life form. Why let the definition of the past limit your future potential? Mewtwo's gaze shifted between Tsunaki and Mew, and the energy sphere in its hand shrank further. Mew, transformed into Mewtwo, also slowly descended, the light on its body beginning to fade, reverting to its original small, pink form. It floated in front of Mewtwo, letting out a series of gentle cries. The sound was no longer challenging, but rather conveyed a sense of understanding and invitation. Mewtwo stared blankly at Mew, looking at the original that provided its genes, and then looked down at the human boy who had risked everything and used peculiar abilities to contend with it. The energy sphere in its hand finally dissipated completely. My path, Mewtwo muttered softly to itself, its hovering height slowly decreasing. Just then, the remaining structure of the castle groaned under the strain. The main load-bearing wall began to collapse, and massive stones rained down. Look out! Ash cried out in alarm. A huge rock was crashing down toward Pikachu and several injured Pokémon. Mewtwo and Mew acted almost simultaneously. Two streams of psychic energy intertwined, forming a massive net that stopped all the falling debris midair. Their gazes met at that moment, and they saw the same determination in each other's eyes. We may be different, Mewtwo's voice echoed in everyone's minds, but we both love this world, and we love life. Mew nodded cheerfully, circled Mewtwo once, and then gently touched its shoulder. A silent understanding was established between the two legendary Pokémon. When the last piece of debris was safely moved aside, Mewtwo slowly descended in front of Tsunaki and Ash. Humans, you have shown me another possibility. You have won. Its gaze lingered specifically on Tsunaki for a moment. Your unique power, and your words, have given me much to think about. Mewtwo's gaze swept over every Pokémon present, both originals and clones. Perhaps the manner of existence is not important, what matters is the meaning of existence. I will take my companions and leave, seeking a place that belongs to us. Mew made a joyous sound, tracing a perfect circle in the air. The morning sun rose from the sea horizon at that exact moment, and golden light streamed through the destroyed top of the castle, bathing every living being. Bathed in the morning light, Mewtwo glanced back at Tsunaki. You were right, human. We can choose our own path. It slowly ascended, sending a psychic signal to all the clone Pokémon. Tsunaki watched the scene and quietly said to Ash, sometimes, the most powerful force is not destruction, but understanding. Ash hugged Pikachu, who had leapt into his arms, and showed a tired but relieved smile. In the sunlight of the new day, Mewtwo led the clone Pokémon and flew toward the distance. Mew circled around them a few times, then transformed into a streak of light and vanished into the sky. Tsunaki gazed in the direction they departed, knowing that this battle of genes had ultimately ended with mutual understanding between life forms. And he, a ninja from another world, had also left his own mark on this legendary confrontation. As Mewtwo and the clone Pokémon vanished into the dawn-reddened sky, and Mew dissolved into a streak of light, Senju Nawaki felt the surrounding scenery begin to blur and distort. That sensation wasn't post-battle dizziness, but the unique feeling of detachment inherent to spatial transition. Experience mission. Mewtwo strikes back, complete. Calculating mission rewards. Forced return initiated. The instant the system's notification echoed in his mind, the Pokémon world before Nawaki's eyes silently dissolved like a faded scroll. The next moment, a slight sensation of weightlessness passed, and he found himself standing firmly in his familiar bedroom back in Konoha. Outside the window, the sky was turning a faint fish belly white. The dim morning light filtered through the paper screen, casting a weak halo within the room. Hu tilde, Nawaki let out a long breath, his tightly wound nerves finally relaxing. Almost simultaneously, he distinctly felt the chakra within him, which had been sluggish and nearly depleted in the Pokémon world, begin to surge forth ceaselessly from the deepest recesses of his being. Like sweet rain returning to a parched riverbed, the streams of chakra quickly converged, rushing and flowing through his entire body. The sensation of power fully replenishing him made him nearly groan aloud. The flow of time between the two worlds truly is vastly different, Nawaki murmured, calculating inwardly. He had spent a considerable amount of time in the Pokémon world, yet only a single night seemed to have passed in the Naruto world. A rough estimation put the ratio at about 124. This meant his adventures in the other world had bought him valuable time for growth. Just then, the cold system prompt sounded again. It carried the routine tone of a completed mission, yet it caused Nawaki's heart to involuntarily accelerate. Ding! Host detected successfully returning to the main world. Initiating calculation of experience mission rewards. Following the prompt, a translucent, ethereal blue screen, visible only to him, unfolded before him. The screen had a technological feel, resembling a game's settlement interface, as data streams cascaded across the refresh area before finally settling. Mission report. Mewtwo strikes back. Mission completion assessment. Excellent. Primary objectives achieved. Rescue Dr. Fuji. Status. Alive, conscious. Defeat Mewtwo. Judgment basis. In the critical confrontation, the host served as a vital auxiliary combatant, cooperating with Mew to successfully restrain and interfere with Mewtwo. This ultimately led Mewtwo to accept the host's philosophy and voluntarily abandon its destructive actions. This is deemed a double defeat, on both tactical and philosophical levels. Hidden elements unlocked. Successfully sealed the key consciousness. Status, consciousness stable, sealed in a special medium. Acquired key life sample. I's DNA, status, intact. Calculating overall rewards. Calculation complete. Rewards are as follows. 1. Base attribute enhancement. Defense IV individual value increased to maximum 31V. 2. Pokémon mark selection right. The host may choose one of the remaining 5 Pokémon captured and brought back from the Pokémon world Skarmory, Jynx, Golbat, Sableye, Haunter to be converted into a new Pokémon Marvel mark. 3. Item Resource Pack. Acquire Hyper Potion X10. Acquire Self-Select Item Mark Held Item Unlock X5. Acquire TM Shadow Ball X1. Defense IV Max. Naoki's eyes burst forth with delighted surprise. Before he could even consider which Pokemon to choose, a familiar warm current, yet far more powerful and profound than any previous influx, poured down from the void without warning, instantly engulfing his entire body. This energy wasn't violent, rather, it carried an aura of profound, unyielding strength. The energy steadily integrated into every inch of his skin, every follicle of hair, and even penetrated the microscopic structures of his nails, bones, and teeth. Naoki could clearly, internally observe his skin structure becoming denser and more resilient under the energy wash. His pores seemed to contract, displaying a subdued luster. His hair and body hair felt invigorated, each strand robust. His nails were covered in a barely perceptible layer of crystalline keratin, their hardness sharply increasing. Even his bones transmitted a faint tingling itch, a sign of rapidly increasing density and strength. He subconsciously joined his fingers like a blade and lightly swiped across the nearby wooden table corner. Chhh. With a soft sound, and feeling almost no resistance, a small piece of wood was cleanly sliced off, the cut surface smooth as a mirror. His fingertip, however, didn't even have a single white mark. Is this the effect of Defense V? Naoki muttered, deeply shaken. This wasn't just about having tough skin, it was an all-encompassing bodily reinforcement, from the macroscopic to the microscopic. This level of defense, combined with his Senju clan physique and the harden move, meant his survival capability on the battlefield would experience a qualitative leap. Reward distribution complete. Host, please select the second Pokemon mark within 60 seconds. Failure to do so will result in random allocation by the system. The system's cold prompt pulled Naoki back from his excitement. He unhesitatingly fixed his gaze on Haunter among the options. The shadowy nature, unpredictability, and various interference and control abilities of the ghost type were undeniably practical in the shinobi world. Whether for reconnaissance, infiltration, assassination, or creating chaos, Haunter's abilities would perfectly complement his ninja skills. I choose Haunter. Selection confirmed. Haunter. Initiating mark conversion and synchronization. As the system confirmed, Naoki felt his consciousness pulled once again into that mysterious mark space. This time, the atmosphere was no longer filled with the vibrant scent of grass, but with deep, silent, slightly chilling shadow energy. In the center of this gloom, the spectral image of Haunter, with its wide grin and sly smile, slowly materialized. However, just as the mark was about to fully solidify, an anomaly occurred. Perhaps due to crossing the barrier between worlds, or perhaps due to an unknown interference between the system energy and Naoki's own chakra during conversion, the Haunter mark suddenly began to fluctuate violently. The dark energy rapidly converged, compressed, and underwent a qualitative change at an unprecedented speed. Under Naoki's astonished gaze, the form of the mark rapidly transformed. Its body became rounder and more robust, its previously detached hands connected to its body, sharp spikes grew on its back, and a strange rune appeared on its forehead. Its iconic crimson eyes and the grin that split back to its ears looked even more sinister and powerful. Warning: unknown energy interference detected. Mark structure unstable. Energy overload. Forced form transition. Conversion complete. Congratulations, host, you have acquired the second Pokemon Marvel mark, Gengar. It evolved directly. Naoki looked at the Gengar mark before him, which radiated an aura far more powerful, deeper, and darker than Haunter's, with a mix of shock and delight. This meant he had skipped the Haunter stage entirely, inheriting the full potential and power of a fully evolved Gengar. The Gengar mark was level 35, and its list of mastered moves was far richer and stronger than Haunter's. Shadow Ball, Curse, Destiny Bond, Hypnosis, Dream Eater, Dark Pulse, Hex. Naoki's heart swelled as he looked at this series of bizarre and powerful ghost and poison-type moves. Especially a rule-based move like Destiny Bond, in a critical moment, it was undoubtedly a powerful trump card, a miniature version of the Reaper Death Seal, so to speak. As the Gengar mark fully integrated into his soul, standing alongside the Ivysaur mark, Naoki felt his perception of darkness and shadows become unprecedentedly sharp. With a thought, his body actually began to sink slowly, silently melting into the shadows on the floor of the room, as if submerging in water. Within the shadow, he could still vaguely perceive the real world and could use connected shadows for short-distance movement. Is this Gengar's phantom force? No, it feels more like the prototype of the shadow contract. Nawaki slowly rose from another patch of shadow, savoring this novel ability. This undoubtedly added a crucial element to his infiltration and escape techniques. While the increase in strength was gratifying, Nawaki did not forget the urgency of reality. He pushed open the window and took a deep breath of Konoha's cool morning air. In the distance, the Hokage rock appeared serene and majestic in the dawn, yet beneath that tranquility, undercurrents were stirring. The clouds of the Second Great Shinobi War were growing heavier, and news of border skirmishes frequently arrived. The condition of his grandmother, Mito Uzumaki, hung over his heart like a massive boulder. The tragedy of the land of whirlpools, destruction had already occurred, meaning the time left for him was truly limited. He had to acquire the power necessary to change everything before the inevitable destined conflict and the massive crisis that might engulf Konoha arrived. Defense v. Gengar Mark. Nawaki clenched his fist, feeling the surging power within him and the strange new abilities. It's still far from enough. He looked at the village slowly awakening outside the window, his gaze sharp as a knife. I must get stronger, and faster. War waits for no one. He turned, quickly organizing his gear and carefully putting away the reward items issued by the system. A new day had begun, and the battle belonging to Senju Nawaki had never ceased. Nawaki sat cross-legged in his room, his mind completely immersed in the system. The experience gained in the Pokemon world not only brought back an increase in combat experience but also unlocked deeper functionalities within the system. Reward: 5 held item seals can be unlocked for free, no materials required. Please select from the following list. Nawaki's spirit lifted, and he immediately began browsing the list of available held items. Unlike single-use consumables, these items were precious objects that could be worn continuously, providing permanent or trigger-based enhancements. His eyes quickly scanned the list. Considering his current situation, the harsh environment of the Naruto world, and his future plans, Nawaki quickly made his decision. I choose Focus Band, Miracle Seed, Shell Bell, Heavy Duty Boots, and Express. Share. Selection confirmed. Initiating seal generation and synchronization. The informational flow of the 5 held item seals poured into Nawaki's mind, and he immediately understood their materialized effects in this world. 1. Focus Band. A red headband imbued with an unyielding will. When the wearer suffers a fatal attack sufficient to cause unconsciousness or loss of combat ability, they retain a sliver of consciousness and mobility through sheer tenacity. This health lock effect at a critical moment is equivalent to having an extra life. A must-have. 2. Miracle Seed. An emerald green seed nurturing immense vitality. When carried, it significantly enhances chakra nature transformation related to the grass attribute. Strengthens the power of grass-type techniques, directly boosting his wood release destructive power, perfectly aligning with the Ivysaur seal. 3. Shell Bell. A small, exquisite bell that emits a pleasant sound. When the wearer deals effective damage to an enemy, they can slightly draw upon the opponent's vitality, feeding back to themselves and restoring a small amount of stamina and chakra. A divine item for long battles. Attack-based recovery greatly enhances his endurance and survival capability. 4. Heavy Duty Boots. A pair of seemingly ordinary but exceptionally sturdy boots that grant immunity to some ground traps. The wearer gains increased resilience against explosive tag traps and even poison mist, weakening underground binding and control effects like earth release, headhunter jutsu, and greatly improving lower body stability. It's definitely not because he's afraid of explosive tag formations, he's just not used to wearing sandals, and he's worried about stubbing his toes on rocks. 5. Express. Share requires 0/5 teammates bound, a peculiar device emitting a gentle white light. It does not need to be physically worn, it takes effect simply by being placed in the system space. It allows the host to gain 50% experience accumulation and full combat insight effort values even when not directly participating in battle or training, a practice accelerator that multiplies efficiency. These are all incredibly practical abilities. A sharp glint flashed in Nawaki's eyes. He immediately took action, first activating the seal for the focus band. A brand new red headband appeared in his hand. The material was tough, and he could feel an unyielding resolve emanating from it. He carefully detached the Konoha symbol metal plate from his original forehead protector and solemnly affixed it to the center of the red headband. As he tied the modified Konoha forehead protector, back onto his brow, a feeling of steadfast resolve spontaneously arose, as if his mental defenses had been reinforced. Next, he strung the miracle seed with a fine cord and hung it close to his chest, alongside the now dull first Hokage's necklace. The seed, pressed against his skin, transmitted a warm, vital energy, making the grass attribute chakra derived from the Ivysaur seal within him more active and refined. The shell bell was tied to the strap of his ninja tool pouch on his waist. The heavy-duty boots replaced his original ninja sandals. As for the express share, it was stored directly in the system space. He needed to carefully consider which 5 chosen workers he should bind to it. Fully equipped, Naoki could clearly feel an immediate, significant boost to his overall strength, especially his survival and endurance capabilities. Next, I need to collect some materials to prepare for exchanging other items later. Naoki straightened his clothes and decided to visit the village's shopping district. Konoha's shopping district lacked its usual bustling atmosphere. Whether the times were peaceful or chaotic was immediately apparent from the market's reaction. Naoki moved through various apothecaries and general stores, purchasing basic materials according to the system list, items that weren't rare but were diverse in type, such as specific plant roots, mineral powders from different regions, and the exoskeletons of certain insects. Outsiders couldn't make sense of these miscellaneous items, and Naoki wasn't worried about speculation. Just as he was leaving a fabric store, holding several pieces of headband material that met the requirements for the focus band's construction, 2 figures caught his attention. It was a man and a woman walking side by side. The man wore simple ninja attire and no forehead protector, but his striking silver spiky hair and the iconic short sword, White Fang, strapped to his back instantly revealed his identity. Hitaki Sakumo. Hitaki Sakumo LV. Cage rank, Pokemon, Hitaki Sakumo. Realm, First Stage, Second Fusion. Energy Chakra, 298,108. Hitaki Sakumo was currently in his prime, his fame immense, even the current, Sannin, could not compare to him. He was one of Konoha's undisputed top-tier experts and an idol worshipped by countless young ninjas. Arm in arm with him was a woman with a gentle and beautiful face. She had long, smooth brown hair, and her abdomen was noticeably rounded, indicating she was pregnant. Naoki keenly sensed a decent flow of chakra within the woman. Although her presence was peaceful at the moment, she was clearly a former kunoichi, or at least someone who had undergone rigorous ninja training. Sakumo Senpai. Naoki stopped and greeted him respectfully, his tone reflecting deference to a powerful figure. Hitaki Sakumo turned at the sound. His sharp, hawk-like eyes softened slightly when he saw Naoki, and he nodded. It's Naoki. He clearly recognized the grandson of the first Hokage, a genius whose reputation had recently soared within the village. Are you out shopping too, Senpai? Naoki smiled, his gaze subtly sweeping over the woman beside Sakumo. Sakumo offered a gentle smile and lightly patted his wife's hand. Yes, accompanying my wife for a walk and buying some things for the child. When his eyes rested on his wife's swollen abdomen, they were filled with the anticipation and happiness of an expectant father. Naoki's heart skipped a beat. Hitaki Sakumo's wife, Kakashi's mother. Information about Kakashi flashed rapidly through his mind. In the original story, Kakashi seemed to have lost his mother quite early, raising suspicion in Naoki's heart. This Tosha, in a world with chakra, medical ninjutsu, and even a top medical master like Tsunade Nichan, would the wife of a Konoha top-tier ninja really die in childbirth? That seems far too illogical. Given Hitaki Sakumo's current status and strength, how could he possibly fail to secure a hospital bed or top-tier medical resources? Regardless of the reason, seeing the couple radiating happy anticipation before him, a trace of reluctance rose in Naoki's heart. He did not want to see a child potentially lose its mother. Is this your wife, Senpai? Congratulations to you both. Naoki smiled with genuine well wishes, then, as if remembering something, he took a small jade bottle, more refined than an ordinary, healing potion, vial, out of his ninja tool pouch. This was a small quantity of super potion, a more potent healing item he had exchanged from the system using the high-quality medicinal herbs provided by the Nara clan earlier. Senpai, this is a secret medicine formulated by my Senju clan, highly effective for restoring chakra and vitality. Naoki handed the jade bottle toward Hitaki Sakumo, his tone sincere. Just in case, it might be of some help at a crucial moment. He didn't overstate its power or mention any ominous guesses about dystocia, merely expressing the respect and concern of a junior towards a senior. Hitaki Sakumo was slightly startled. He clearly hadn't expected Naoki to suddenly offer medicine. He looked at the seemingly unusual medicine in Naoki's hand, then at Naoki's clear and sincere eyes. Given his status and strength, he wouldn't typically bother with ordinary medicine, but Naoki's identity as a member of the Senju clan, and the subtle rumors recently circulating about his secret remedies prevented him from immediately refusing. Especially since the reason for the gift concerned his most important family member. After a moment of thought, he didn't decline. He solemnly accepted the jade bottle. "That is thoughtful of you, Naoki. I accept this gift." He carefully put the bottle away, and his gaze toward Naoki held a new level of genuine warmth and recognition. Sakumo's wife also smiled gently at Naoki and said softly, "Thank you, Naoki-kun. You're too kind, senpai, it's no trouble at all." Naoki smiled. "I won't disturb you two any longer. I'll take my leave." Watching Naoki's retreating back, Hitaki Sakumo tightened his grip slightly on his wife's hand. He may not have fully grasped the deeper significance possibly contained within the bottle of medicine, but this perfectly timed gesture of goodwill was something he genuinely took to heart. On Konoha's streets, Naoki carried a freshly bought bag of miscellaneous supplies, but his mind already drifted to his upcoming training plan. The power surge from the fully charged hard plate and meadow plate, along with the gains from his adventures in the Pokemon world, gave him a clearer yearning for strength. However, this tranquility did not last long. Ahead at the street corner, a sudden rush of slicing air and a harsh shout abruptly shattered the harmonious atmosphere. "Stop! Don't let him get away!" 3 Anbu ninjas wearing animal masks and standard uniforms formed a V-shaped formation, pursuing a slender, unusually agile gray-clothed man. The man was clearly at his limit, wounded, with erratic chakra fluctuations, yet his escape direction seemed oddly strange. Naoki's steps faltered, his brows slightly furrowed. Under the bright daylight, such a fierce pursuit in the heart of the villagers' activity area was itself rather abnormal. He instinctively slowed his pace, his body shifting slightly aside to clear the main passage, while his sharp eyes surveyed the situation. As a freshly graduated genin, he knew that a conflict of this level was not his place to intervene. Maintaining vigilance and avoiding being caught up was the wise course of action. But the moment the spy brushed past him, an anomaly suddenly erupted. The gray-clothed man seemed to have premeditated, his body snapping sharply. Instead of continuing to flee, he lunged like a predatory cheetah, with resolute ferocity, straight toward Naoki's position. Simultaneously, a flash of cold steel from his hand as a kunai deftly thrust toward Naoki's flank. Naoki's pupils suddenly contracted. What does that mean? Wild Pokemon. It's charging. LV. Chunin. Hostile Pokemon. Rank. First tier Chunin. Energy. 18,265. Whoa. System confirmation. This was not a hasty accidental collision, but a precise action with a clear attack intent. The opponent's target had been him from the start, or rather, to force him to act. Quick attack. In a heartbeat of thought, Naoki's body reacted before his mind. Chakra beneath his feet erupted instantly, his form sliding like a phantom several feet backward and to the side, narrowly evading the lethal thrust. The kunai's tip barely skimmed his clothing, the gust it generated stinging his skin. Fast reaction. The gray-clothed man's strike missed, a flash of surprise in his eyes, yet his movement never halted. With a flick of the wrist, the kunai traced a bizarre arc, shifting from thrust to slash, aiming straight at Naoki's neck. The assault was fierce, the angle ruthless, far beyond what an ordinary spy could possess. A warning bell rang in Naoki's mind. The opponent's martial skill and timing indicated he was at least a chunin. He didn't dare delay, quickly drawing his kunai. Clang. The kunai collision produced a metallic clang, and Naoki felt a considerable force. The strength is indeed not weak. Naoki's gaze hardened. He had thought this was just an ordinary capture scenario, at most being inadvertently drawn in. But now it seemed more like a trap aimed at him. The two instantly tangled, fists and feet clashing, kunai striking, producing a rapid cacophony. Naoki combined the Senju clan's hard fist with the speed advantages from Pokemon moves and abilities, moving with fleeting grace and swift strikes. Meanwhile, the spy's techniques were sly and cunning, often attacking from unexpected angles. His experience was extremely seasoned, matching Naoki's skill in a short bout. What chilled Naoki further was that the three pursuing Anbu now seemed sluggish. Although they formed an encirclement, blocking the spy's main escape route, they did not join the fight immediately to assist Naoki. Their actions seemed more about maintaining a perimeter, ensuring the battle wouldn't spread too widely and that the spy wouldn't truly escape. Yet regarding Naoki's fierce clash with the spy, they appeared to relish it, deliberately or not slowing their approach, as if observing and waiting. What are they watching? My technique. A cold thought flashed through Naoki's mind. Combining his earlier conversations with his sister Tsunade, teacher Orochimaru, and others, and his sensitive status as an heir of the Senju clan. A name of an organization floated into his mind, Root. Only that hidden group, the Root, controlled by Danzo Shimura, would use such underhanded, reckless methods to test. In the instant Naoki's mind cleared, the spy seemed to realize the opportunity had passed, the prolonged battle unfavorable. A flash of impatience and ferocity crossed his eyes. While using Naoki's momentum to retreat with a strike, his gaze swiftly swept the surrounding panicked crowd caused by the commotion. He ultimately locked onto a small girl, about 6 or 7 years old, frozen in terror, clutching a tattered rabbit plush in her arms. Not good. Seeing the change in the opponent's eyes, Naoki's heart sank, seized by an extreme sense of foreboding. The spy suddenly halted, poised to lunge at Naoki again, prompting Naoki to instinctively brace. However, it was a realistic feint. His true target was the defenseless little girl. Under Naoki's glaring stare, the cold glinting kunai, utterly inhumane, directly pierced the rabbit plush the girl clutched to her chest. PFF'd. The dull thud of the weapon entering flesh rang sharply in the brief silence. The kunai's tip pierced the soft plush, deeply stabbing the girl's tender abdomen. Blood instantly gushed, soaking the plush and staining her light-colored dress crimson. The once adorable rabbit plush was now torn open with a gaping wound, drenched in vivid scarlet, limply hanging beside the wound, a tragic, heartbreaking sight. Time seemed to freeze for an instant. Immediately, the surrounding crowd erupted in even more terrified screams and cries. Naoki's eyes instantly turned crimson, his fury erupting like a volcano. He could never have imagined that the opponent would be so insanely cruel as to lay such a deadly hand on an innocent child. The spy landed his strike, showed no desire to fight, didn't even glance at Naoki, and retreated violently, miraculously breaking through the Anbu's encirclement in an instant. Naoki didn't even have time to pursue, all his attention focused on the little girl who lay in a pool of blood, her breath fading. He surged to the girl's side like a whirlwind, quickly covering the still bleeding wound with one hand, pressing down the pierced doll as well, attempting to stem the blood loss. With his other hand, he swiftly retrieved the scarce, hyper potion he had exchanged using the Nara family's premium herbs from his ninja tool pouch. Without a hint of hesitation, Naoki popped the cork and carefully poured the life-rich liquid, whose vigor far surpassed that of a super potion, into the pale girl's mouth. The potent medicine quickly took effect, seemingly stabilizing a sliver of the girl's rapidly fading life, and the severely bleeding wound showed faint signs of contraction under its influence. Yet her complexion remained as pale as paper, her life flame flickering like a candle in the wind. He snapped his head up, his crimson gaze like a beast ready to devour, locking onto the 3 Anbu who were about to chase the spy. I remember you. Naoki's voice was low but ice-cold and bone-chilling, laced with unabashed murderous intent, each word striking the expressionless animal masks. The Anbu hesitated briefly, the eyes hidden beneath their masks flickered momentarily, yet they remained silent. They gave no response to Naoki's threat, instantly employing the body flicker technique to vanish from the spot as if they had never been there. The scene was left with chaos and weeping civilians, the barely alive little girl cradled alongside the blood-stained doll, the seething Naoki, and the glaring pool of blood on the ground. Soon, a sharp whistle sounded as a squad of security force ninjas, their backs bearing the emblem of the Ping Pong Racket clan, rushed to the scene, beginning to evacuate the civilians and maintain order. Leading them was the young yet already composed Uchiha Fugaku, now a squad leader of the security force. Uchiha Fugaku LV. Jonin. Pokemon. Uchiha Fugaku. Rank. First Stage Jonin. Energy. 181,670. Fugaku's sharp gaze swept the area, immediately spotting Naoki, who was clutching the little girl and radiating a low-pressure aura. He hurried forward, crouched down to examine the girl, his brows knit tightly. Naoki-kun, what's happening? Fugaku's voice was steady, bearing a businesslike tone, yet his eyes held a trace of gravity at the tragic scene. Naoki took a deep breath, forcing down the rage that threatened to consume him, and carefully handed the little girl over to Fugaku. Senior Fugaku, please take her to the Konoha hospital immediately. She took the secret medicine from my Senju family. Her life is temporarily secured, but her injuries are severe. His voice was hoarse from suppressed anger and a barely perceptible lingering fear. Though the secret medicine is potent, he wasn't sure it could save a child so gravely wounded. Fugaku sensed the almost tangible malice radiating from Naoki, solemnly nodded, signaling the squad behind him to carefully take the girl. I understand, I'll handle the hospital side, you. I need to go to the security force to assist with documentation, I understand. Naoki cut off Fugaku's words, glancing toward the direction the girl was swiftly taken, then surveying the still shaken, pointing villagers. Finally, he cast his cold gaze toward where the Anbu had vanished, his fists cracking audibly. I'll go, but not now. Naoki's voice was low and resolute, bearing an undeniable determination. I have more pressing matters to attend to now. He needs an outlet, and more importantly, answers. This fury, on the verge of bursting his chest, and the pent-up frustration must find an outlet, and only one person can give him the answers, has the ability and willingness to help locate the root cause. His teacher, Orochimaru. Naoki had no doubt that, given teacher Orochimaru's knowledge of the village's hidden currents and his affection and regard for this disciple, he would know the approximate location of the root base and understand his current rage. He intends to see Orochimaru, not only to vent this murderous intent but also to demand answers about what that old fool Danzo is truly after. Teacher Orochimaru would never stand idly by his plight. Fugaku watched Naoki's suppressed, explosive state, fell silent for a moment, then finally nodded, I understand. I'll handle the preliminary matters for the security force here. Thanks. Naoki forced 2 words through his clenched teeth, said no more, spun sharply, his figure leapt a few times, then vanished at the street's end, heading toward the village's edge where teacher Orochimaru's secluded research base lay. He needs power, guidance, and the support of someone he trusts to confront this blatant, darkness-born provocation. Uchiha Fugaku watched Naoki's disappearance, then glanced at the glaring pool of blood on the ground and the blood-stained doll picked up by a squad member. A complex, inscrutable glint flickered in his black eyes, inherited from the Uchiha lineage. He whispered to the nearby squad members, thoroughly sweep the scene and soothe the civilians. Today's incident is probably not that simple, have someone inform the Senju side as well. Inside the Hokage's office, the atmosphere was so heavy it felt tangible. Hiruzen Sarutobi sat behind his large desk, his pipe long extinguished, yet he still gripped it unconsciously. His face, usually a blend of warmth and authority, was now covered in a frosty grimace, his sharp gaze like 2 keen swords piercing Danzo Shimura, who stood before him with a gloomy expression. And standing beside Danzo were Homura Mitokado and Kaharu Udatane, both with slightly furrowed brows. Danzo. Hiruzen Sarutobi's voice was low, laced with suppressed fury. Do you know what you're saying? Have Naoki join Root? Are you mad, or do you think I'm old and senile? He slammed his hand on the table, the heavy solid wood groaning under the strain. Senju Naoki, the first Hokage's own grandson. Tsunade's younger brother. The junior that Mito-sama values most. You want him to go to your shadowy Root. What are you trying to do? Do you want to disturb the first Hokage's peace in the Pure Land? Danzo faced Hiruzen Sarutobi's towering rage with an unruffled expression, only his exposed single eye gleaming with stubborn, cold light. Leaning slightly forward on his cane, his voice was hoarse but carried an undeniable certainty. Hiruzen, precisely because of his special status, he should dedicate everything to the village. Senju Naoki graduated early, has no fixed squad, and his idle resources are a waste. Border skirmishes are increasing daily, and we need capable people. Root can provide the harshest yet most effective training, allowing him to quickly grow into a weapon useful to the village. This is the best way to honor the Senju name. Nonsense. Hiruzen Sarutobi was so angry he swore, his chest heaving violently. He is a person. A leaf ninja, not anyone's weapon, and certainly not a tool for you, Danzo, to manipulate at will. This is absolutely impossible. Don't even think about it. Seeing that his direct demand for Naoki had failed, a predictable shadow flashed in Danzo's eye. He abruptly changed the subject, his tone becoming even more aggressive. Fine, if you're unwilling for him to contribute his talent to the village, then he should at least contribute the resources he possesses. Danzo's single eye stared intently at Hiruzen Sarutobi. I have confirmed that Senju Nawaki possesses a secret medicine whose effects far surpass conventional ones, even stronger than the samples I previously collected by chance. That medicinal effect is enough to turn the tide of battle at critical moments and save countless ninja lives. This is truly a strategic level material. His voice suddenly rose, filled with righteous indignation. Senju Nawaki, as a descendant of the first and second Hokage, has the heroic blood of Konoha's founders flowing within him. To possess such a powerful secret medicine and not actively submit it to the village, does he still have the village in his eyes? Does he still uphold the will of fire? I demand that he immediately and unconditionally hand over the secret medicine formula for the village to manage and produce. This twisted, specious argument not only left Hiruzen Sarutobi dumbfounded, but even Homura Mitokado and Kaharu Udatane, who were standing by, showed expressions of shock and disbelief. While they sometimes leaned conservative and supported some of Danzo's proposals to strengthen the village, openly coercing a child to give up private property, and under such fabricated charges, truly crossed their bottom line. Danzo, you. Hiruzen Sarutobi's fingers trembled with anger as he pointed at Danzo, about to furiously rebuke his old friend without restraint. Just then, poof, an Anbu figure wearing an animal mask appeared in the center of the office without warning, kneeling on one knee, and reported urgently, Lord Hokage. Emergency. Hiruzen Sarutobi forcibly suppressed his almost exploding rage, took a deep breath, and asked in a low voice, what is it? The Anbu looked up and quickly said, we've received reports from patrol teams and multiple villagers about violent and continuous explosions and chakra fluctuations from the northeastern edge of the village, near the border of the Forest of Death. Based on the energy reactions and eyewitness descriptions, it appears to be Lord Orochimaru and his disciple, Senju Nawaki, attacking the entrance of an underground facility. That area, according to records, seems to be related to Root. What? The faces of the four people in the office changed drastically at the same time. Hiruzen Sarutobi was a mix of shock and anger. He instantly understood the cause and effect. It must have been Danzo's methods that angered Nawaki, and the child went to his most trusted teacher, Orochimaru, for help. Homura Mitokado and Kaharu Udatane were full of shock and confusion. Orochimaru and Nawaki attacking the Root base. This was simply outrageous. And Danzo Shimura, for the first time, showed intense emotional fluctuations on his usually placid face. His eyes were filled with astonishment, anger, and a hint of unbelievable gloom. He had calculated everything, but he never expected Senju Nawaki's counterattack to be so fierce, so direct. He also never expected Orochimaru to actually move directly against his route for this disciple. Meanwhile, at the edge of Konoha, where the Forest of Death met the remote mountainous region. Boom tilde. Another powerful impact, a mixture of chakra and plant-based energy, slammed heavily into a thick metal gate that had suddenly risen from the ground, emitting a deafening roar. Runes flickered and twisted violently on the gate's surface, but it ultimately did not shatter immediately. Nawaki stood in a chaotic clearing, his chakra surging, his eyes burning with undisguised fury and killing intent. The red, spirit headband, embedded with the Konoha symbol on his forehead fluttered without wind, the miracle seed on his chest emitted a faint green glow, and the seashell bell on his waist made a subtle ringing sound with his breathing. Just a short while ago, he had found Orochimaru, filled with rage. Teacher, I want to kill someone. Can you help me? Orochimaru, who was then tinkering with some dangerous reagents, paused slightly upon hearing Nawaki's abrupt but intensely resentful words. His golden snake eyes fell upon Nawaki's crimson eyes and clenched fists. Then, on his pale face, instead of any reproach or inquiry, he slowly broke into a wide, grotesque smile, full of excitement and pleasure, a strange laugh. Hiss tilde. He licked the corner of his mouth with his tongue, his eyes glinting like someone who had found an interesting experimental subject, yet also with a pure, unconditional indulgence and support for his disciple. Good. No questions about the reason, no weighing of pros and cons, just a simple, good. It was as if Nawaki had said he wanted to step on an ant, and Orochimaru would unhesitatingly offer him the most suitable shoe. After briefly listening to Nawaki's anger-filled account of the incident on the street, a look of understanding and mockery flashed in Orochimaru's eyes. Danzo, still resorting to these underhanded tactics, I see. He casually picked up a jacket. Let's go, Nawaki. Teacher will take you to kill someone. And so, this scene unfolded. Orochimaru stood leisurely not far behind Naoki, arms crossed, leaning against a tree trunk that had most of its bark stripped away by the shockwave, as if everything before him had nothing to do with him, merely an idle observer. But his very presence was Naoki's greatest support and an invisible deterrent to the root members lurking in the shadows. At this time, the entrance area of the root base appeared much cruder compared to the future well-equipped and heavily guarded base. It relied more on genjutsu and natural terrain camouflage, and its defensive facilities were far from their peak. "Can you find the target?" Orochimaru asked Naoki in a flat tone, looking at the stubbornly resisting metal gate, as if asking what he wanted for dinner tonight. Naoki sensed the cold, obscure, uniformly numb chakra reactions emanating from behind the gate and deep within the earth beneath his feet. He snorted, "It doesn't matter. If they don't come out, I'll force them out." He abruptly clapped his hands together, his chakra circulating wildly at an unprecedented speed. Water release. Wild water wave. Skill. Earth power. Rumble. The earth trembled, as if some colossal creature was rolling beneath the ground. Violent explosions, sounds of structural collapse, and faint grunts and cries continuously emanated from underground. Naoki was going to turn the entire root base upside down. He wanted to vent, to warn, to tell Danzo Shimura in the most direct way possible. "If you dare to extend your claws, I'll dig you out root and all." Orochimaru watched this furious attack, a blend of vitality and stillness, full of Naoki's personal style, and the admiration in his golden snake eyes grew even stronger. Naoki's furious assault, a blend of water release and earth power, was like a true natural disaster, mercilessly scouring and tearing at the upper defenses of the root base. The ground looked as if it had been plowed by a giant, vegetation toppled, and hidden vents and camouflaged rock walls collapsed amidst the roar, revealing twisted metal structures and flashing electrical sparks below. Thud, thud, like rats flushed from their nests by a flood, figures in gray or black tight-fitting suits, wearing various animal masks, scrambled out in disarray from every concealed exit, and even from forcibly torn fissures. In just a few breaths, over 15 root ninja appeared. They silently and swiftly formed a defensive formation, their eyes, through their masks, coldly fixed on the culprit of all this. And Orochimaru, who was even more formidable, behind him. However, Naoki's gaze, like the most precise probe, instantly pierced through these dozen figures, firmly locking onto 4 of them. The 3, Anbu, wearing familiar animal masks, and the gray-clad spy from the street. They were standing together, and the spy had even changed into a standard root uniform, though traces of hurried, incomplete disguise still lingered on his face. Rage, like a bonfire doused with hot oil, exploded. "I told you." Naoki's voice wasn't loud, but it carried a chilling frost that seemed to freeze 1,000 miles, clearly reaching the ears of every root ninja. "I remember you." He raised his hand, pointing at the 4 targets, especially the spy, his killing intent almost solidifying. "You. And you 3. Among the root ninja, a seemingly leader-like figure stepped forward, his gaze, from beneath his mask, passed over Naoki, attempting to negotiate with Orochimaru behind him. "Root ninja have appeared. Lord Orochimaru, this is a vital root location. What is the meaning of this? Allowing your disciple to attack an Anbu facility, even if you are the Hokage's disciple, you still." His words were cut short. Because Naoki moved. Quick attack. Without any warning, Naoki's figure left a faint afterimage in place. The next instant, he was like lightning tearing through space, charging directly towards the spy. His speed was far beyond the reaction limits of most root ninja present. "Stop him!" the root leader shouted sharply. The 2 root ninja closest to Naoki immediately acted, their kunai glinting coldly as they stabbed towards Naoki's path of advance. However, just as their kunai were about to touch the hem of Naoki's clothes, hidden shadow snake hands, a cold and hoarse voice rang out. Several thick pythons shot out like specters from Orochimaru's sleeves, arriving before the kunai, precisely coiling around the wrists and ankles of the 2 root ninja. The powerful restraint instantly stiffened them, and their kunai fell from their hands. Orochimaru's figure had appeared at some point behind and to the side of Naoki's charging path. He still had his arms crossed, his posture leisurely, but his golden snake eyes swept over the remaining root ninja, carrying a suffocating sense of oppression. Orochimaru's tongue licked his lips, revealing a sinister and cold smile. "You'd best not move." Before his words finished, more venomous snakes surged from the shadows behind him, hissing, forming an invisible barrier that separated all the other dozen root ninja who wanted to come forward to assist. With his single presence, he faced over a dozen elite root ninja, at least Chunin level, and actually created a battlefield solely for Naoki and the spy to duel. The spy saw his comrades blocked and his retreat cut off, a ruthless glint flashing in his eyes. He knew that at this moment, he could only fight with all his might. He roared, his chakra erupting throughout his body, his hands quickly forming seals, wind release, wind cutter jutsu. Several sharp wind blades whistled as they slashed towards Naoki, who had already rushed close. Harden. Naoki didn't dodge, crossing his arms in front of him, his chakra instantly covering and hardening his skin, which took on a metallic sheen. Clang, clang, clang. The wind blades struck his arms, emitting sounds of metal clashing, leaving only a few shallow white marks, completely unable to penetrate his defense. And Naoki, using the momentary impact, unleashed a second burst of chakra beneath his feet. High-speed movement, his figure blurred, moving in a strange arc to bypass the after effects of the wind blades, instantly closing in on the spy's inner circle. What? The spy's pupils constricted sharply. He had never expected Naoki's speed and defense to be so monstrous. In a hurry, he could only raise his kunai to block. Too slow. Naoki's cold voice rang in his ear. Leaf whirlwind. A swift whip kick, accompanied by a piercing shriek that tore through the air, slammed hard into the spy's hastily blocking arm. Crack. A clear sound of bone breaking rang out. Ah tilde. The spy screamed, his entire body kicked off the ground and sent flying backward by the immense force, his kunai also flying out of his hand and spinning into the sky. But this was just the beginning. Naoki gave the opponent no chance to breathe, activating quick attack, again, chasing after the flying spy, like a shadow. Bang! A heavy elbow strike slammed hard into the opponent's chest and abdomen. PFF tilde. The spy's body arced like a shrimp in midair, a mouthful of blood mixed with stomach acid gushing out. Naoki landed, and before the opponent's body could hit the ground, he quickly reached out with both hands, grabbing one of the opponent's arms and his collar. Move! Slam! He roared, putting strength into his waist and abdomen, directly swinging the opponent like a broken sack, arcing him through the air, and then slamming him hard and unceremoniously into the ground. Boom! A shallow pit was created in the ground, and dust flew up. The spy's entire body felt as if it had fallen apart, blood continuously oozing from his mouth and nose, and his mask shattered, revealing a middle-aged man's face twisted in pain. However, Naoki's rage was far from appeased. He remembered the little girl lying in a pool of blood, the pierced, blood-stained rabbit doll. Naoki leaned down, his fist, covered in the hardened sheen, slammed onto the opponent's face like a heavy hammer. His nasal bridge instantly collapsed, and blood splattered. Then he lifted his foot and kicked hard into the opponent's ribs. Another agonizing sound of bone breaking. Bang bang bang. Thud thud thud. Naoki completely abandoned the use of ninjutsu, instead engaging in a one-sided beating with the most primitive, violent, and satisfying methods. Fists, feet, elbows, knees, every part of his body became a weapon, raining down on the spy, like a storm. He was like someone out of control, his movements vicious and merciless, each blow imbued with chakra and towering rage. He beat the opponent so that he had no power to fight back, only able to writhe and wail in pain on the ground, blood staining the dirt beneath him. The surrounding root ninja watched with bloodshot eyes, several times wanting to rush forward, but were firmly stopped by Orochimaru's cold gaze and the restless swarm of snakes. Finally, when the spy was already on his last breath, and even his screams had become faint, Naoki stopped his stormy assault. The opposing Pokemon fainted. Venusaur and Gengar gained experience points. Venusaur LV.38 plus 118, Gengar LV.35 plus 108. Defeated a Root Chunin. Naoki was panting heavily, not from exhaustion, but from the intense emotional fluctuations. He took a step forward, lifted his foot, and with the sole of his shoe, covered in dirt and blood, he harshly and insultingly stepped on the opponent's chest, slowly applying pressure, cough, PFFT. The spy beneath him spat out another mouthful of blood, his eyes beginning to lose focus. Just then, Naoki, stop at once. An anxious and authoritative roar, like thunder, came from a distance. Several figures were rapidly approaching. Leading them was none other than Hiruzen Sarutobi, clad in his Hokage robes and wearing a straw hat. His face was filled with shock, anger, and urgency. Behind him were Danzo Shimura, his face as dark as water, his eyes almost spitting fire, and Homura Mitokado and Kaharu Yutane, looking shocked and conflicted. They had finally arrived, and what greeted their eyes was the scene of Naoki standing like a victor, his foot on a root ninja. The entire scene instantly froze at the sudden arrival of Hiruzen Sarutobi and his group. Naoki stepped on the chest of the dying root ninja, his foot even slowly applying pressure, causing the man beneath him to let out unconscious groans of pain. He lifted his head, his face devoid of panic, only in lingering ferocity and a cold, almost defiant calmness, as he met the gaze of the hastily arrived Hokage and advisors. Orochimaru, meanwhile, maintained his leisurely posture, the venomous snakes dangling from his sleeves silently threatening the root members who dared not speak their anger, his golden snake-like eyes sweeping over Danzo's ashen face with undisguised mockery. Naoki, stop at once. Hiruzen Sarutobi looked at the messy battlefield, the fallen root ninja, and Naoki's clearly out of control state, his anger flaring, his voice gaining several degrees of severity. Behind him, Homura Mitokado and Kaharu Yutane also frowned deeply, the sight before them was truly horrifying. However, before Naoki could respond, a figure moved faster than any sound. Whoosh tilde. Almost the instant Hiruzen Sarutobi's words fell, Danzo Shimura had already flickered out like a ghost. His target was not Naoki, but he appeared not far from Naoki's side, precisely positioning himself between Naoki and Orochimaru, subtly forming a confrontation. He didn't even glance at his dying subordinate on the ground, his single eye fixed on Naoki, his voice hoarse and cold, filled with an undeniable accusation. Senju Naoki, you attacked an Anbu facility, severely injured fellow village ninja, openly defied the Hokage's orders, and are acting as a rogue ninja. What do you have to say for yourself? He completely ignored the earlier conflict on the street, directly pinning the gravest crime on Naoki, and then abruptly turned to the root ninja held back by Orochimaru, sternly shouting, "What are you still standing around for? Lord Hokage is here, hurry and apprehend the rogue ninja Senju Naoki. Resist, and you will be killed on sight." This act of twisting facts and overstepping his authority enraged Hiruzen Sarutobi. Danzo, shut your mouth. This is not your place to give orders. His chest heaved, and his pipe was almost crushed. Upon hearing this, the few root ninja instinctively took half a step forward, but the hissing of the snake's tongue from Orochimaru's sleeve and the cold killing intent made them stop dead in their tracks, their gazes involuntarily turning to the true Hokage. Hiruzen Sarutobi took a deep breath, suppressing his anger towards Danzo, and turned his gaze to Naoki and Orochimaru. Orochimaru, Naoki, what exactly happened here? I need an explanation. Upon hearing this, Naoki's lips curved into a cold arc, and he finally slowly removed his foot from the root ninja's chest. Explanation. Naoki's voice was flat, yet carried a bone-chilling coldness. Lord Hokage, the explanation you seek is simple. He pointed at the spy, lying like a heap of mud at his feet, his tone filled with undisguised mockery. This fellow, on the street not long ago, disguised himself as a spy being pursued by those three. His finger suddenly swung towards the three Anbu, wearing familiar animal masks. During his escape, he actually, in a fit of madness, tried to kill a defenseless little girl, only 6 or 7 years old. Naoki's voice suddenly rose, the crimson returning to his eyes, and suppressed fury surged once more. If I hadn't happened to have a secret family medicine on me that barely kept her alive, that child would be dead now. And those three. His finger, like a sharp sword, pointed at each of the three Anbu, masks in turn, were present at the scene, yet they watched it all unfold like puppets, even intentionally allowing it. As for this so-called spy, Naoki sneered, why is he now in your base? Hiruzen Sarutobi's face darkened, and Homura Mitokado and Kaharu Yutane's expressions grew increasingly grim. They were not fools. Although Naoki's words didn't mention root, every sentence pointed to Danzo's shady tactics. The dying spy, trampled by Naoki, seemed to have a momentary flicker of hope in his eyes when he saw Danzo arrive, struggling to get up. Naoki's gaze sharpened, and he mercilessly delivered another fierce kick to his waist. Ah! The man screamed, collapsing again, more blood spilling from his mouth. Impudent! Danzo, seeing this, his eyes practically spitting fire, roared, you dare commit violence in front of the Hokage. You are too impudent. I'm impudent. Naoki seemed to have heard the biggest joke. He no longer looked at Danzo, but turned his gaze to Hiruzen Sarutobi, his tone carrying a hint of playfulness, yet imbued with undeniable forcefulness. Lord Hokage, I can hand the person over to you. After all. Before he finished speaking, Naoki suddenly bent down, grabbed the spy by the hair, his arm muscles bulging, and like swinging a rag doll, he forcefully swung a living person around. With a bone-jarring whoosh, he slammed the man fiercely in Danzo Shimura's direction. At the same time, his free left hand flashed across his ninja pouch, and the kunai, with a sharp shriek, arrived first, accurately and forcefully piercing the man's abdomen along the trajectory of his airborne flight. PFF'd. The dull thud of a blade entering flesh, blood splattering in the air. Danzo instinctively reached out to catch his flung subordinate, his hand met warmth and stickiness. Seeing the kunai deeply embedded in the man's abdomen, almost passing through his body, and the clothes instantly soaked with blood, his remaining sanity completely ignited. You're asking for death. Danzo roared in fury, his single eye blazing with murderous intent. Almost without thinking, his free left hand instantly formed a seal, and his chest puffed out. He clearly no longer cared that the Hokage was present, only wanting to kill this brat who had repeatedly challenged his authority on the spot. HMPH. Orochimaru snorted, a cold glint flashing in his golden snake eyes, ready to intercept. However, someone was faster than him. Danzo, you're the one asking for death. A furious shout, like a leopardess, descended like thunder from above. Accompanying this voice was a terrifying, heart-stopping power. A golden figure, moving faster than the eye could follow, violently burst into the battlefield. She leapt high, her right leg, like a battle axe, descended with the force to split mountains and shatter rocks, aiming a fierce chop at Danzo in the area he occupied. Boom tilde. Tsunade's signature jutsu. Heavenly foot of pain. The earth beneath her feet was as fragile as tofu, instantly cracking open. A massive fissure, centered on her landing point, spread wildly like a spiderweb, and a violent shockwave, mixed with shattered rocks and dust, swept forward in a fan shape. Danzo and Hiruzen Sarutobi, who was closest to him, bore the brunt. Their faces changed drastically, and almost by instinct as cage-level strongmen, they instantly retreated, narrowly avoiding the destructive core area. Homura Mitokado and Kaharu Udatane retreated in a panic, looking somewhat disheveled. Amidst the swirling dust, Tsunade stood proudly in front of Naoki, her golden ponytail fluttering in the turbulent airflow. Her fists were clenched, and her brown eyes burned with raging fury, fixed on Danzo Shimura, who had just regained his balance. Her gaze seemed to say that if Danzo dared to make any further move, the next strike would land directly on his head. Sister. Naoki looked at the back shielding him, a warmth spreading in his heart, and softly called out. Immediately after, several more whooshing sounds echoed. Jiraiya, Konoha's elite Jonin, Kodo Mokum, and Dan Kato appeared one after another, landing beside Naoki and Orochimaru. Kodo Mokum LV. Jonin. Pokemon. Kodo Mokum. Realm. First Realm Jonin. Energy Chakra. 102,100. Dan Kato LV. Jonin. Pokemon. Dan Kato. Realm. First Realm Jonin. Energy Chakra. 124,448. Jiraiya looked at the tense, chaotic scene before him, couldn't help but scratch his white hair, and asked, bewildered, what exactly is going on here? How did it get like this? The scene was utterly silent. On one side were the Hokage, the advisors, and the enraged leader of Root. On the other side, led by Tsunade, were the two Sannin, Orochimaru and Jiraiya, along with Konoha's elite Jonin Kodo Mokum and Dan Kato, and at their center, protected by them, Senju Naoki. The two sides confronted each other, the atmosphere as taut as a drawn bowstring. Naoki stood behind his sister, looking at Danzo's ashen face and Hiruzen Sarutobi's complex expression, his face devoid of compromise or fear, only a chilling calmness, and deep in his eyes, the unextinguished pleasure of vengeance and the belief in an eye for an eye. Why should he, Senju Naoki, bow down to such a cowardly, scheming rat who plots against his own comrades? Jiraiya, Mokum Gonpachi, and Kato Dan exchanged glances, their faces etched with varying degrees of frustration and confusion. Their team, including Tsunade, had just returned to Konoha, dusty and tired, after completing a border reconnaissance mission. With the village gate in sight, Tsunade, who had been relatively calm and even somewhat carefree throughout the journey, suddenly unleashed her chakra without warning. Her expression instantly turned as cold as frost, and without a word of explanation, she shot off like an arrow towards a certain direction in the village. Her speed and demeanor suggested her home was on fire. The three of them thought that Konoha had suffered some sudden attack or that something earth-shattering had happened. Greatly alarmed, they didn't have time to think and immediately burst into their fastest speeds, chasing after her, afraid that Tsunade would fall into danger alone. But who would have thought that after anxiously chasing all the way here, what they saw was such an absurd sight? Tsunade was furious, splitting the earth with a kick, and was at loggerheads with Elder Danzo Shimura and his rude subordinates. Orochimaru leisurely blocked more than a dozen rude elites, looking as relaxed as if he were watching a show. And Senju Nawaki, protected in the center, looked like he had just finished beating someone, still seething with anger, with a root member lying unconscious at his feet. Opposite them were the grim-faced Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi and two advisors with complex expressions. What in the world was going on here? Although countless questions raced through their minds, Jiraiya and the other two didn't hesitate. As they landed, they naturally positioned themselves behind Tsunade, forming an invisible united front with Nawaki and Orochimaru. Years of fighting side by side and sharing life and death had forged trust and bonds that, at this moment, transcended their confusion over the unclear situation. No matter why Tsunade was angry, they chose to unconditionally stand by their comrade. Danzo Shimura saw all of this, the malevolence in his single eye almost solidifying and oozing out. He suppressed his apprehension about Tsunade's earlier strike and turned to Hiruzen Sarutobi, whose face was equally grim, speaking in a sarcastic and inflammatory tone, with a hint of passive aggression. Hiruzen, look at the Hokage you've become. For the sake of a reckless brat who attacked a fellow villager, even your own disciples are openly defying the Hokage's authority. Do they still see you as Hokage? Do they still care about the village? This is practically rebellion. He deliberately emphasized the word, rebellion, attempting to escalate the conflict to the level of defying the village's order. Jiraiya frowned deeply. Although usually carefree, he sensed something was wrong and was about to quietly ask Orochimaru for details. Just then, buzz, an incredibly vast, ocean-like surge of chakra, without any warning, emanated from deep within Konoha village, from the direction of the Senju clan compound, spreading out majestically. This chakra was not a violent, aggressive type, it was warm, immense, carrying a life-affirming aura that soothed all unrest, and an absolute majesty tempered by years of experience. Like an invisible tide, it instantly engulfed the entire confrontation area, and even a wider expanse of Konoha. In the face of this chakra, whether it was the surging power within Nawaki, Tsunade's monstrous strength, Danzo's dark schemes, or even Hiruzen Sarutobi's Hokage prestige, they all seemed like fireflies compared to the bright moon, too insignificant to mention. Everyone present, from cage-level powerhouses to ordinary root members, changed color and were profoundly shaken. Hiruzen Sarutobi, Homura Mitokado, and Kaharu Udatane's eyes were filled with reverence and nostalgia. Tsunade, Orochimaru, Jiraiya, and the others were all wide-eyed with shock and disbelief. Mokume Gonpachi and Kato Dan felt their breath catch, as if an invisible mountain had been placed on their shoulders. Even the root ninja, despite their rigorous training and suppressed emotions, found their bodies trembling uncontrollably. And Danzo Shimura, who had been speaking in that passive-aggressive, instigating manner, felt as if an invisible hand had gripped his throat. All his words were instantly caught, his face turned deathly pale, and fine cold sweat immediately beaded on his forehead. He felt it, a cold warning, directed at him, contained within that chakra. Then, a calm, aged, yet undeniably authoritative female voice clearly resonated in everyone's ears. No, it resonated directly in the depths of everyone's minds. Enough, this ends here. The voice was not loud, yet it seemed to contain the profound truths of heaven and earth, carrying an absolute power to end all disputes. It was Mito Uzumaki, the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, the first Hokage's wife, Konoha's pillar of stability. Although she had lived in seclusion for many years, her very existence was one of Konoha's greatest assets. Ordinarily, she never interfered in village affairs, but once she spoke, even the Hokage had to give her the highest level of attention. This incredibly powerful chakra and the direct reprimand that echoed in their minds, like a sweet rain from the heavens, instantly extinguished all the agitation and killing intent at the scene, shocking everyone's minds. Hiruzen Sarutobi let out a long, deep sigh, as if expelling all the pent-up frustration from his chest. He gave a complex look at Naoki, who was protected in the middle, then a cold glance at the sweating Danzo, and a decision was made in his heart. He no longer hesitated, his voice regaining the steady authority of the Hokage, and he clearly issued his orders. All injured personnel are to be immediately sent to Konoha Hospital for treatment, without delay. His gaze shifted to Danzo, his tone unequivocal. Danzo, you will return to the root base immediately. You are not to take another step without my command. Danzo abruptly looked up, his single eye filled with unwillingness and indignation, opening his mouth to argue, Hiruzen, I. No more words. Hiruzen Sarutobi interrupted sharply, his gaze as keen as a blade, that is an order. Danzo's remaining words were forcibly swallowed back. He clenched his teeth, feeling the suffocating, immense chakra that hadn't completely dissipated, and Hiruzen Sarutobi's undeniable attitude. He knew that today, he had completely lost. He lowered his head deeply, concealing the almost overflowing malice and coldness in his eyes. In the face of absolute power and prestige, all his schemes and justifications seemed so pale and powerless. Power, strength, Danzo roared inwardly, if I don't have enough power, I'll end up like today, unable to protect my own subordinates, unable to even touch a mere brat. If I don't have enough overwhelming strength, I can only tremble under the chakra of this old hag. After today's events, he became even more determined to expand route and recruit and train top experts. Konoha's newly built orphanage had enough potential candidates to screen. As for Senju Naoki, Danzo scoffed inwardly. Defeating his Chunin subordinates was nothing in his eyes. After all, his teacher, Tobarama Senju, had already made a name for himself on the battlefield at that age. But some of the strange ninjutsu Naoki used and that incredibly effective secret medicine were too important, he absolutely couldn't let it go just like that. He hoped Hiruzen's subsequent handling wouldn't disappoint him. Watching Danzo lead the remaining root ninja away in silence, like a defeated rooster, Hiruzen Sarutobi turned his gaze to Tsunade, Naoki, and the others. Naoki. His tone softened slightly, but still carried an undeniable authority, and the rest of you, follow me to the Hokage's office first. Tsunade snorted, but feeling her grandmother's chakra slowly receding, she knew there was no point in continuing the uproar. She just glared fiercely in the direction where Danzo had disappeared, then patted Naoki's shoulder, signaling him to follow. Orochimaru shrugged indifferently, a hint of amusement flashing in his golden snake-like eyes. Jiraiya, on the other hand, breathed a sigh of relief. At least they didn't have to fight for real, although he was still completely bewildered. Mokume Gonpachi and Kato Dan exchanged glances and silently followed. A fierce conflict that almost ignited the Konoha High Command was forcibly put on hold by the unfathomable power of Mito Uzumaki. But everyone knew that today's events would not simply be brushed aside. The conflict between Senju Naoki and Danzo Shimura, and even with the deeper rules of the village, had only just begun to surface. Naoki followed behind his sister and teacher, looking back in the direction of the Senju clan compound, a warm current flowing through his heart. It was Grandma Mito who had protected him at the crucial moment. At the same time, the flame deep in his eyes had not extinguished, instead, it burned even more calmly and resolutely. Relying on the protection of elders was not a long-term solution. Only by possessing power capable of crushing everything could he truly control his own destiny and exact his revenge with satisfaction. A faint scent of lingering gunpowder seemed to still hang in the air of the Hokage's office, but this was largely superseded by an intense curiosity and scrutiny. Naoki stood in the center of the office, neither shrinking back from the recent conflict nor deliberately drawing attention to himself. The previous fury had drained from his face, replaced by a settled calm. His gaze was clear and resolute, as if the youth who had just retaliated with thunderous force was the same person now calmly presenting his achievements, merely having shifted states. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he systematically lined up several small porcelain vials and canned sprays one by one on Sarutobi Hiruzen's desk, his movements methodical. Only after completing this did he lift his head, calmly meeting the intense gazes of the Konoha elders. Uncle Hiruzen. His voice was clear, carrying the distinct timbre of a youth, yet his tone was steady and balanced, neither subservient nor arrogant. These, he said, are the new secret medicines that Orochimaru-sensei and I have developed, with guidance from Grandma Mito. He picked up the porcelain vial labeled, injury medicine, holding it without rushing to open it. We utilized sealing jutsu to construct a miniature reaction field, within the container, sealing the pre-processed herbal base liquid in an awaiting activation state. When use is required, chakra triggers the activation, instantly completing the potion synthesis. Sarutobi Hiruzen nodded slightly, signaling him to continue. The core focus is the medicinal effect. Naoki set the vial down, speaking with certainty. These 3 recovery agents, injury medicine, good injury medicine, and great injury medicine, offer clearly graded effects for external wounds and stamina recovery. Through testing, the efficacy of the great injury medicine approaches the level of a skilled medical ninja using the mystical palm technique, taking effect almost instantaneously and requiring no hand signs. Close to the mystical palm technique. Instantaneous effect. There was a subtle stir in the office. Kaharu Udatane and Homura Midokado leaned forward slightly, their eyes sharply scrutinizing the porcelain vials. Even Jiraiya put away his joking expression, becoming serious. Naoki didn't pause, bringing out several other agents. These are status removal types: burn remedy, antidote, paralysis cure, and frostbite cure, each designed to resolve a specific abnormal status. He concisely stated the name and purpose of each, without elaborate description, yet everyone present fully grasped the tactical value represented by these agents. Have the effects been verified? Homura Midokado asked gravely, his gaze piercing. All agents have undergone rigorous testing, Naoki answered without hesitation, glancing at Orochimaru. Sensei can vouch for this. Orochimaru's golden snake pupil swept over the group before he uttered 2 words flatly, that is correct. This endorsement from Orochimaru carried immense weight. Tsunade looked at her younger brother, her eyes complicated. She saw the confidence in his eyes, and the determination to solve problems in his own way. Violent retaliation was one form of expression, demonstrating value now was another kind of power. At this point, Orochimaru stepped forward half a pace, his voice steady as he guided the conversation to a deeper level. Sensei, the secret medicines are remarkably effective, but our existing research conditions are quite limited. To further enhance efficiency, systematically explore greater possibilities, and even attempt to replicate and optimize current achievements, a dedicated, well-equipped laboratory, a stable supply of high-grade materials, and corresponding research funds are indispensable. Orochimaru's gaze swept across the room. This will not only guarantee the stable production of the current secret medicines but also lay the groundwork for the village to develop new achievements of greater strategic value. Sarutobi Hiruzen's eyes shifted slightly, he understood Orochimaru's implication. This was about institutionalizing the cooperation and providing long-term support. Naoki looked at Sarutobi Hiruzen, clearly stating his request. Uncle Hiruzen, I want to cooperate with the village. If the village can provide a laboratory, necessary materials, and funding support, Sensei and I can focus more on research and production. I will not interfere with how the village allocates and utilizes the resulting secret medicines. However, we request half of the profits generated from them. He paused, his voice gaining firmness without sounding greedy. This 50% of the profit will be allocated to 3 areas: improving the conditions of the Konoha orphanage, providing aid to families within the village who have lost their only child, and serving as supplementary funds for future research into new secret medicines. This is the original intent behind my creation of these medicines, and it is the extent of what I can do for the village. There was no groveling, no aggressiveness, only a clear request and a transparent explanation of the funds' intended use. He openly presented his self-interest, framing it publicly for the benefit of the village's vulnerable populations and future development. Meanwhile, Orochimaru's demands for a laboratory and other resources were cleverly packaged as necessary investments for the village's future interests. Sarutobi Hiruzen gazed intently at Naoki, then looked at Orochimaru, who stood nearby, calm in expression yet definite in attitude. This 10-year-old boy had just demonstrated a sharpness that would not tolerate bullying, and now he presented a proposition sincere enough to alter the status quo, backed by powerful supporters. His proposed condition, while ostensibly requesting half the profits, essentially channeled the vast majority back to the village's most vulnerable groups and future R&D. Supporting his research was undoubtedly providing an insurance policy for Konoha's future. Especially with the silent deterrence of Uzumaki Mido still lingering in everyone's minds, this mutually beneficial, future-focused cooperation proposal appeared exceptionally judicious. Kaharu Udatane stared at the secret medicines on the table. This time, she was silent. Compared to the immense strategic value and potential future research results offered by the secret medicines, providing a laboratory and corresponding resources was an entirely worthwhile investment. Sarutobi Hiruzen slowly rose to his feet, his gaze sweeping over the secret medicines on the desk before finally settling on Naoki and Orochimaru. His voice was steady and forceful, delivering the final verdict. Agreed. The village will formally approve a fully equipped laboratory, and the necessary research materials and funds will be allocated as required, under your complete authority. Nara Shikaku will jointly draft the cooperation details and the distribution of the secret medicine output with you. These medicines will be classified as top secret and prioritized for supply to the Anbu elite. He looked at Naoki, a hint of expectation in his voice. Naoki, maintain this intention and persistence. Konoha's future requires new strength like yours. Understood. Thank you, Uncle Hiruzen. Naoki bowed slightly, a bright, genuine smile appearing on his face, the relief of achieving his goal and the anticipation of future research. He still possessed the vigor of youth, but it was now tempered by a quiet strength. He knew he had successfully carved out a solid and supported foothold on the land of Konoha, using his own methods, for himself, for the people he cared about, and for his path of power exploration. These secret medicines and the future laboratory were the seeds he had sown, connecting the present with a future full of possibilities. The heavy Hokage office door closed behind him, temporarily isolating the internal conflicts and deliberations. The corridor was dimly lit, a stark contrast to the bright sunshine outside. Naoki exhaled softly, his taut nerves relaxing slightly. Though he had appeared composed in the office, he had actually been under considerable pressure. After all, he had been facing several of the top figures in Konoha's power structure. Naoki-kun, Lady Tsunade, a gentle female voice called out. Everyone looked towards the sound to see a young woman in a simple kimono, with a serene demeanor, waiting at the end of the corridor. It was Mito Uzumaki's personal attendant. Lady Mito requests that both of you return to the estate immediately, the attendant said with a slight bow, her tone respectful yet firm. Her gaze lingered on Naoki for a moment, with a hint of subtle concern. Tsunade rubbed her temples, a look of exhaustion and helplessness on her face. She glared at Naoki, her voice fierce, but unable to hide her underlying worry. You brat, I'll deal with you when we get back. Naoki shrank his neck, not daring to speak. He knew his sister was truly worried. Jiraiya clapped Naoki on the shoulder, grinning, good job, kid. But don't be so impulsive next time. Though he spoke casually, his eyes also held a hint of lingering fear. Dan Kato smiled gently, Naoki, it's good that you're safe. Hiruzen Sarutobi also nodded in greeting. After a brief farewell, Tsunade pulled Naoki along, ready to follow the attendant. Just then, Naoki suddenly stopped and turned to Orochimaru, who had been silently following behind them. Orochimaru-sensei, Naoki's voice carried sincere gratitude, thank you for today. He bowed deeply. Orochimaru's golden snake-like eyes flickered slightly, and the corners of his mouth curved into a faint smile, you are my disciple. The implication was that protecting his disciple was only natural. Naoki straightened up, looking at Orochimaru with clear eyes, and extended an invitation, Sensei, shall we go together? I still have some questions I'd like to ask you and Grandma Mito. His tone was natural, like a disciple encountering a difficult academic problem and wanting to consult both his teacher and an elder at home. Jiraiya and the others didn't think much of it. After all, Orochimaru was Naoki's instructor, and they had just fought against Root together. It was perfectly normal for the master and disciple, who clearly had a close relationship, to have research questions to discuss. However, Tsunade and Orochimaru exchanged a glance, both seeing a hint of understanding in the other's eyes. They knew Naoki too well. If it were just ordinary ninjutsu questions, Naoki would never have so solemnly and eagerly invited Orochimaru to the Senju main residence after just experiencing such turmoil. This kid definitely had something more important and unusual on his mind. Orochimaru pondered for a moment, then nodded, very well. I also have some ideas about sealing jutsu that I can discuss with Lady Mito. He found a plausible excuse. Then let's go together. Tsunade didn't object. She also wanted to know what this kid was really up to. So, the four of them followed Mito's attendant towards the Senju compound. Inside the Hokage office, Hiruzen Sarutobi stood quietly before the large floor-to-ceiling window, his gaze deep as he watched the figures gradually disappear below. His brows were tightly furrowed, a profound weariness etched between them. Once, he had thought that inheriting the Hokage position was an honor, a source of power. But now, he increasingly felt it was more like an incredibly heavy shackles. He did not possess the absolute power to suppress an era like the first Hokage, nor the decisive ruthlessness and infallible strategies of his teacher, the second Hokage. More often than not, he was balancing, mediating, searching for that fragile fulcrum among various factions and demands. Everything that happened today had left him utterly exhausted. Hiruzen, Homura Mitokado's voice sounded from behind him, with a hint of displeasure. Naoki, that child, isn't he a bit too unruly? And, those secret medicines and peculiar ninjutsu of his, I'm afraid. Kaharu Udatane interjected, indeed. Although Lady Mito is a woman of great understanding, Naoki is still young, and his thoughts are hard to fathom. Is it too risky to entrust such important resources and techniques to his personal leadership? And without clear explanations, there might be future troubles. Hiruzen Sarutobi didn't turn around, still looking out the window, his voice imbued with a deep weariness. Future troubles. Of course, I know those things would never have come from Lady Mito's teachings, or the Senju clan's hidden legacy. He paused, his tone unusually firm. If Lady Mito possessed these, with her unreserved love for Konoha, she would have brought them out long ago to strengthen the village, and certainly wouldn't have waited until today for Naoki to present them in this manner. A brief silence fell in the office. Hiruzen Sarutobi was right. Mito Uzumaki's loyalty and devotion to Konoha were beyond doubt. So, Naoki must be hiding something. Hiruzen Sarutobi said slowly. He turned around, looking calmly at his two old friends. But, do we need to care? Do we need to get to the bottom of it? He shook his head, answering his own question. No, we don't. His gaze sharpened, sweeping over the still somewhat resentful and calculating faces of Homura Mitokado and Kaharu Udatane. An inexplicable surge of irritation and disappointment welled up in his heart. These companions who had once fought side by side, at some unknown point, had also been blinded by power and self-interest, forgetting their initial vows. Hiruzen Sarutobi took a deep drag from his pipe, exhaling thick smoke, as if to expel the pent-up frustration in his chest. It was as if he had suddenly thought of something, or as if long-suppressed emotions had finally found an outlet. In an almost abrupt tone, filled with heavy questioning, he quietly asked his two longtime companions. Homura, Kaharu, tell me, if we were to die right now, would we be able to face Sensei with a clear conscience? This sentence was like a clap of thunder from a clear sky, instantly erupting in the office. Hiruzen, you. Homura Mitokado's face instantly flushed red, as if he had been struck in his most painful spot, yet he couldn't utter a single word. Kaharu Udatane also trembled, the color draining from her face. She opened her mouth, but it ultimately amounted to a look of mortified defeat. Both stared dumbfounded at Hiruzen Sarutobi, as if seeing their Hokage for the first time. The weight of that sentence was too immense, heavy enough to directly interrogate the soul, heavy enough to make even these bystanders feel a pang of dread. Facing their former teacher, the second Hokage Tobarama Senju, who had dedicated his life to the village's development and ultimately sacrificed himself to cover their retreat. Could everything they were doing now truly be done with a clear conscience? A deathly silence fell over the office. Only the faint flickering sound of sparks in Hiruzen Sarutobi's pipe, and the suffocatingly heavy introspection, echoed in everyone's hearts. Senju clan compound, inner courtyard tea house. The serene atmosphere was a stark contrast to the earlier clamor of the Hokage tower. A faint scent of sandalwood lingered as Mito Uzumaki knelt in the main seat. Tsunade and Orochimaru sat on either side, and Naoki sat opposite them. The maid quietly withdrew, closing the shoji screen door. Tsunade had just picked up her teacup, her brow furrowed, ready to fulfill her promise of, "I'll deal with you later," when Naoki spoke first. "Grandma, sis, teacher Orochimaru." Naoki's expression was unusually serious, even carrying a solemnity unbefitting his age. "Before we discuss anything else, there's something I think I should show you first. This might explain a few things." He paused, as if words alone were too pale to describe it, then clasped his hands together in front of his chest and quickly formed a few simple yet unfamiliar hand seals. They were not any known mainstream Konoha ninjutsu seals. The next moment, under the astonished gazes of the three, a vibrant, emerald green light glowed in Naoki's palm. A strange seed, encased in a hard shell yet emanating immense vitality, slowly emerged, hovering above his palm, pulsating gently. Technique: Parasitic Seed. Immediately after, Naoki formed another hand seal, and two flexible and agile green vines, as if possessing a will of their own, snaked out from the sleeve of his other hand, swaying gently in the air, creating a faint whooshing sound. Inside the tea house, a deathly silence instantly fell. What is this? Tsunade's eyes widened abruptly, and her teacup fell onto the tatami mat with a thud, the warm tea soaking the straw mat, though she didn't notice. Her gaze was fixed on the seed and vines, her body trembling slightly from extreme shock. As the granddaughter of the first Hokage, she knew better than anyone what this meant. It was wood release. It was the Kekkei Genkei of Hashirama Senju, who had brought peace to the warring states. However, the sight before her was different from her grandfather's powerful wood release described in records, which could destroy cities and summon towering trees. These vines appeared more slender and flexible, and the vitality contained within the seed was purer and gentler, lacking the domineering force and possessing more agility. An undisguised tremor also appeared on Mito Uzumaki's usually calm face. Her fingers tightened slightly around her teacup, and in her eyes, which had witnessed the vicissitudes of the world, was reflected the familiar emerald green in Naoki's hand, yet in a completely different form. She murmured, her voice carrying a hint of imperceptible choke, "Hashirama's power." Orochimaru's golden snake-like eyes suddenly constricted, gleaming with extreme excitement and curiosity. He leaned forward slightly, as if he wanted to thoroughly analyze this unprecedented form of wood release. Interesting, a completely different manifestation, and the chakra fluctuations too. Tsunade had long forgotten her intention to scold Naoki. She looked at the hovering seed, and her eyes instantly reddened. When Naoki was born, both her grandfather and her second grandfather were already gone, so she couldn't experience Naoki's feelings for these two ancestors. But she was different. She had truly been cherished by her grandfather and taught by her second grandfather. That blood-connected kinship, that longing for departed loved ones, was completely ignited at this moment by the similar green in Naoki's hand. "Naoki, you." Tsunade's voice was choked, almost unable to form a complete sentence. Naoki looked at his sister's reddened eyes, and his heart softened. He dispelled the seed and vine whip in his hands, and the vibrant sense of life in the room slowly subsided. He walked over to Tsunade and pulled the necklace from his chest. The originally dark green gem was now extremely pale, almost transparent. "Sister," Naoki held the necklace in his palm, his voice sincere, "I really have to thank you. If you hadn't given me Grandpa's necklace, I might never have awakened this power." He had already prepared his explanation. The existence of the system was an absolute core secret, but he could use the necklace as a perfect catalyst excuse. "There's still some of Grandpa's chakra and will remaining in this necklace." Naoki looked at the transparent gem, his tone filled with just the right amount of emotion and respect. "When I wore it to cultivate, the chakra inside seemed to resonate with my body. It was like a key, unlocking something dormant within me. Then, I naturally perceived and mastered this power." He looked up at Mito and Tsunade, who were still in shock, and Orochimaru, whose gaze was burning, and continued to explain, "However, my power seems to be different from Grandpa's powerful wood release, which is recorded to summon forests and change terrain." He stretched out his hand, once again channeling chakra. This time, several leaves with sharp, cold edges condensed at his fingertips, then shot out like shuriken, precisely cutting off a section of a flower branch protruding from a vase in the distance. It was precisely the flying leaf swift blade. "I prefer to call it grass release." Naoki gave his own definition. "It may not be able to instantly create a battlefield covering forest like Grandpa, nor can it cast that massive wood golem jutsu. In terms of scale and absolute power, it's probably far inferior." He changed his tone, his voice carrying a clear understanding of his own abilities and a hint of confidence. "However, this grass release is more intuitive for me. It focuses more on growth, entanglement, absorption, and recovery." As he spoke, he formed another hand seal, and a gentle, green wave carrying the fragrance of grass spread out from him, covering a small area of the tea house. Technique: Grassy terrain. In this area, the wet stain on the tatami mat where Tsunade had spilt tea earlier visibly shrank at a speed perceptible to the naked eye, as if the moisture had been absorbed by an invisible force. Even the air in that area became fresher, invigorating one's spirit. Mito closed her eyes, carefully sensing this power, and slowly said, "Indeed, compared to Hashirama's power, which contained immense vitality and was almost rule-creating, Naoki's power leans more towards agility and resilience, and its connection to nature seems to be closer. She opened her eyes and looked at Naoki, her eyes filled with relief and an indescribably complex emotion. For Mito Uzumaki, Naoki's power stemmed from her husband's legacy, yet it had taken a different path. This was, in a way, both a continuation and a new beginning. Orochimaru licked his lips with his tongue, his voice filled with suppressed excitement, not a degradation but a mutation. No, it has evolved into a branch more suited to the host's own characteristics. It consumes less chakra, allows for more precise control, and its tactical applications might be more diverse. Naoki, your grass release is immeasurable. Tsunade looked at Naoki, then at the faded necklace in his hand. Finally, all the shock, sorrow, and worry transformed into a long sigh and a hint of relieved pride. She reached out and vigorously ruffled Naoki's hair, her voice still a little nasal. You brat, this is truly wonderful. She was excited that her grandfather's power continued in her brother in another form, and also relieved that Naoki had found his own unique path. Naoki felt the pressure on his head, knowing that this hurdle had been cleared. He successfully attributed the origin of grass release to the first Hokage's necklace and demonstrated its uniqueness and value, paving the way for other potential Pokemon abilities he might reveal later. Naoki slowly withdrew from his chakra refining state, feeling the increasingly abundant power within his body. Ever since he demonstrated grass release in front of his grandmother, sister, and teacher, Naoki had clearly felt a subtle yet profound change in the way his closest relatives looked at him. His older sister, Tsunade, would still knock him on the head and scold him for being reckless, but deep within her brown eyes, besides the usual concern, there was an added, unspeakable sense of anticipation, as if she had glimpsed a certain hope for the future. Occasionally, she would stare at him distractedly before forcefully patting his shoulder and saying, "Do well, Naoki. Don't disgrace your grandfather and the Senju clan." Grandma Mito's gaze was gentler and more profound, a sense of relief and satisfaction that came from witnessing a new sprout break ground, carrying with it thoughts and blessings that spanned across time. She no longer inquired too much about the details of his power, but when he consulted her about sealing jutsu, she explained things with greater patience. She would occasionally mention anecdotes about his grandfather, Hashirama Senju, during his youth, her words full of guidance and expectation. The one who had perhaps changed the most was his teacher, Orochimaru. The curiosity and interest in his golden snake eyes intensified, but his gaze was no longer simply that of someone looking at an interesting experimental subject. Instead, it was mixed with a scrutiny and investment reserved for a future partner and possibility. The research materials and guidance he provided Naoki were more profound, and he even began discussing taboo topics involving the essence of life and the source of chakra, as if paving the way for a future collaborator. This feeling of having such high hopes placed upon him by his closest relatives made Naoki feel somewhat overwhelmed. It was as if the burden on his shoulders had suddenly become much heavier overnight. Whenever he saw the undisguised expectations in their eyes, he would silently clench his fists and tell himself, "I absolutely cannot let them down." However, he knew well that Konoha was not all sunshine. Although the root incident that day had been forcibly suppressed, the shadow still lingered. He needed a more stable foothold, and he also needed to rapidly increase the strength of himself and those around him. This reminded him of the learning device rewarded by the system. Finding a moment, Naoki took a trip to the Konoha Military Police Force headquarters to cooperate with Fugaku Uchiha in processing the follow-up reports for the street attack incident that day. The procedures were strictly businesslike, and Fugaku's demeanor remained steady yet distant. "Thank you for your cooperation, Naoki-kun." Fugaku signed the documents, his voice calm and even. "The nature of the incident and the subsequent medical expenses for the girl will be covered by the village. As for those root members," he paused, lifting his eyes, his black pupils showing no discernible emotion, "they have been dealt with internally. The details are inconvenient to disclose." Naoki nodded, not asking further. He knew he wouldn't get any more information about Danzo from Fugaku. The two walked out of the military police building side by side, the atmosphere subtly stagnant. The long-standing feud between the Senju and Uchiha was like an invisible chasm separating them. Although the Uchiha hadn't yet reached the point of being universally despised during this time period and were still an indispensable fighting force for Konoha, private contact between core members of the two clans ultimately required maintaining distance to avoid suspicion. Captain Fugaku, what is your view on the current state of the village? Naoki asked casually, his gaze sweeping over the Uchiha clan members patrolling the street, wearing their fan-shaped armbands. Fugaku Uchiha did not stop walking, his tone still flat. The military police's duty is simply to maintain the village's order. Some disturbances are best left alone once they subside, there is no need to delve too deeply. Naoki caught the warning in his words, smiled, and said nothing more. The two tacitly separated at the street corner and went their separate ways. The constraints of their identities ultimately prevented the exchange from going any deeper. It seems that finding a breakthrough or establishing a closer connection with the Uchiha side is impossible for the time being. Naoki mused internally, not feeling disappointed. The road ahead was long, and some things couldn't be rushed. Returning to his room, Naoki closed the doors and windows tightly, and focused his mind into the system space. The learning device, emitting a gentle white glow, was quietly suspended there. The binding conditions were simple. The target must be non-hostile, meet the requirements for friendliness and intimacy, and belong to the same faction. The system truly was domineering. Naoki liked this direct mechanism of, if I acknowledge you, I don't need your consent. In the Pokemon world, the learning device shared experience, allowing Pokemon to level up, grow, and evolve. But here, in the Naruto world, its function truly transformed into sharing a ninja's most valuable assets, combat experience, insights into jutsu, and chakra application techniques. This was nothing short of an invisible accelerator for experience and insight. Without any hesitation, Naoki decisively selected 5 heaven-chosen workers for himself. These 5 were either close mentors and relatives whose interests aligned with his, or individuals of immense power and boundless potential. Deeply binding them was a guaranteed profit. 1. Orochimaru, teacher, research partner, intimate ally, currently the most important supporter and collaborator. 2. Jiraiya, his sister's teammate, straightforward personality, seemingly unreliable but possessing unfathomable strength, the future guide of the Child of Prophecy in the original work. 3. Tsunade, closest blood relative, his most solid backing. 4. Kato Dan, ambiguous relationship with his sister, possesses the powerful S-rank forbidden jutsu, spirit transformation technique, immense potential, and a gentle, upright character. 5. Hitaki Sakumo, the White Fang of Konoha, his strength surpasses all contemporaries, currently at his peak. Furthermore, he owes Naoki a favor due to the medicine incident. Binding him is invaluable, whether for experience sharing or potential future returns. As he finalized his selection, the light of the learning device flickered slightly. 5 invisible threads, perceivable only by Naoki, seemed to cross spatial boundaries, connecting to each of the 5 targets. Done. A satisfied smile curled Naoki's lips. He could feel that a subtle connection had been established. In the future, 50% of the experience and insights from every battle, every training session, and even every flash of inspiration regarding jutsu from these 5 powerhouses would continuously flow through this invisible channel into his experience pool, driving his growth faster. The newly added Ghost and Rock attributes, along with the series of eerie and powerful moves brought by the Gengar imprint, filled Naoki with confidence. With more comprehensive attributes, a rich skill pool, and the 5 major experience packages connected via the learning device. All of this provided him with greater capital to handle future turmoil. Naoki looked out the window, his gaze seemingly piercing through space to see the distant future. Next, I must desperately absorb nutrients and grow strong during this brief calm before the storm arrives. He would absolutely not disappoint those hopeful eyes, nor would he let his own destiny slide once again into the unknown abyss. Time flew by, like sand slipping through fingers, and 2 years had passed in the blink of an eye. The dark clouds of war, like an ever-gathering lead gray mass, hung heavily over the entire shinobi world. Even the usual bustling liveliness of Konoha village seemed somewhat diluted by this invisible pressure. Over these 2 years, Naoki spent most of his time with Orochimaru in the officially approved village laboratory, steadily producing various recovery elixirs in accordance with the agreement reached with Hiruzen Sarutobi. Healing potions, and superior healing potions, had begun to be distributed on a small scale to Anbu members on high-risk missions and frontline reconnaissance teams. Their excellent effects earned them high praise and secured a continuous and stable flow of resources for Naoki and the laboratory. The convenience and prestige brought by the cooperation were tangible. Shikaku Nara, acting as an intermediary, managed all affairs meticulously, even beginning to leverage the Nara clan's channels to collect rare materials for the laboratory, attempting to reverse engineer or optimize the formulas. Although progress was slow, it was a beneficial endeavor. However, all this smoothness could not dispel the heavy feeling currently weighing on Naoki's heart. He had just emerged from the inner courtyard room where Granny Mito Uzumaki resided, his steps somewhat heavy. The lingering glow of the setting sun stretched his shadow long across the corridor, imbued with a sense of desolation. He tried his best to straighten his back, wanting his silhouette to appear less stiff and sorrowful, but his slightly trembling fingers betrayed the turmoil within him. In his hand, he tightly clutched a newly completed sealing scroll. The scroll was cold to the touch, but within it, sealed was Granny Mito Uzumaki's vast and pure chakra, and a trace of her actively stripped, soul-imprinted source power. Just like the chakra imbued with love and protection that Minato and Kushina left within Naruto in the original story. It was also similar in principle to the reincarnation technique Orochimaru would later develop using chakra-infused cursed seals. This was the most important thing Naoki had secretly been doing over the past 2 years, while accompanying his grandmother and learning sealing jutsu. Continuously and carefully collecting and sealing her chakra. He did it extremely discreetly, using the excuse of researching the unique chakra nature and powerful vitality of the Uzumaki clan. Granny Mito seemed to have noticed but never pointed it out. Instead, at the last moment, she actively cooperated, injecting a core wisp of her source power into this final scroll. Naoki knew this day would eventually come. He had long anticipated it. Ever since the destruction of the Land of Whirlpools, his grandmother's physical and mental health had been declining at an accelerated rate. But when this day was truly imminent, the suffocating feeling of knowing the outcome yet being powerless to change it still instantly overwhelmed him like a cold tide. Mito Uzumaki had reached her limit. The transfer of the Nine Tails Jinchuriki was set for the coming days. He silently and solemnly placed this scroll, which carried hope, deep into the absolute safety of his system space, alongside the disk containing Ai's consciousness. This was the most insignificant, yet also his full-hearted struggle, in the face of the rules of life and death. From the inner courtyard entrance, an uncontrollable sob reached him. It was Kushina. She had grown quite a bit taller, her vibrant red hair like a burning flame, but at this moment, this flame seemed to be drenched by tears, appearing dim and sorrowful. She was crying in Tsunade's arms, her shoulders heaving violently, her sobs mournful and helpless. Tsunade held her tightly, and even she, usually so strong and bold, now had red eyes. She gently patted Kushina's back, whispering words of comfort, yet her own face was etched with undisguised grief. Naoki stood not far away, quietly watching this scene, his throat feeling constricted, unable to utter a sound. He did not go forward to comfort them. In the face of the pain of separation and death, any words seemed pale. His own heart was similarly heavy and choked, as if a huge stone was pressing down on it. To him, Granny Mito was not just a blood relative, but also the elder who had given him the most warmth, guidance, and protection since he arrived in this world. Her loving kindness and wisdom were deeply etched into his soul. I've preserved hope, but in the future, can I truly achieve it? Naoki silently asked himself. Resurrecting the dead, reversing life and death, even to him, with his system, this still seemed like a distant, unknown realm. This hope was as faint as a candle in the wind. He clenched his fists tightly, his fingernails digging deep into his palms, bringing a sharp sting that barely allowed him to maintain his outward composure. Now was not the time to wallow in sorrow. The current shinobi world was already a massive powder keg. All nations were frantically massing troops at their borders, skirmishes and conflicts were increasingly frequent, and small-scale encounters were happening almost daily. A major war was on the verge of breaking out, and the air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and blood. The Land of Fire had long begun strict control over strategic materials like ironware and food. Market prices, especially for food and medicine, had soared several times over the past 2 years, significantly impacting the lives of ordinary villagers. Although mission rewards had also been adjusted upwards, they still couldn't keep pace with the rapidly rising prices, and resentment and unease quietly simmered among the lower ranks. Meanwhile, Hanzo of the Salamander, the leader of the Land of Rain, sandwiched between the 3 great nations, had been acting increasingly erratically recently. Initially, He merely used inspection as an excuse, occasionally detaining merchant caravans passing through the Land of Rain, engaging in banditry and extortion. For the past 6 months, he had barely bothered with pretense, directly condoning, or even commanding, his ninja to openly plunder resources in the border regions between the Land of Rain and the lands of Fire, Earth, and Wind, employing brutal methods. He presented a brazen, almost deranged demeanor, as if daring anyone to challenge him, completely unconcerned with life or death. Konoha's pressure was unprecedentedly immense. To the east, they had to guard against Sunagakure, to the north, be wary of Kumogakure, and to the west, directly face Iwagakure and the half-mad Hanzo. Internal undercurrents, such as Danzo's route, would certainly not remain idle at such a time. Naoki took one last look at Tsunade and Kushina, immersed in their grief, and took a deep breath of the cool, twilight air. Grief needed to be expressed, but he could not stop moving forward. His grandmother's passing signified the end of an era, and also meant that one of his strongest shields, which he could rely on, was about to disappear. He had to grow faster, to possess enough strength to protect everything he wished to protect in the coming storm that would sweep across the entire shinobi world. The footsteps of war were already close at hand. He had no choice but to move forward. The transfer of the Jinchuriki was quietly completed 3 days ago, on a drizzly evening. The process was almost eerily smooth, without alarming any unrelated parties, as if it were just an ordinary affair. Uzumaki Mito, a pillar who had walked through the Warring States period and silently supported Konoha's decades of peace after the successive fall of brilliant stars like Senju Hashirama, Uchiha Madara, and Senju Tobirama, thus bid farewell to this world in an almost silent manner. There was no grand funeral, no village-wide mourning. The Konoha higher-ups and the closest siblings, Tsunade and Naoki, tacitly chose to keep the news under wraps. During the same period, Hanzo the Salamander, the leader of the Land of Rain, as if driven mad, brazenly declared war on the 3 neighboring great nations, Fire, Earth, and Wind. The flames of the Second Great Ninja War had already ignited, and if Uzumaki Mito's departure were made public, the blow to Konoha's morale would be devastating. Who would have thought that the old lady, who always wore a gentle smile and sat deep within the Senju compound, seemingly able to protect the village forever, would just quietly pass away? The shadow of war swallowed Konoha's daily life at a visible speed. Large numbers of ninjas were urgently conscripted, and teams of figures in green vests silently and swiftly departed for various borders, under the complex and unspoken gazes of the villagers. The entire village was like a war machine forcibly awakened, beginning to operate on overdrive. The air was filled with anxiety, tension, and a faint, lingering scent of blood. It was in this atmosphere of total war preparation that Naoki first truly confronted the cruel reality of the Senju clan. Through Orochimaru's connections and the partial privileges he now enjoyed due to the secret medicine cooperation, Naoki accessed the clan's registration archives in the village. When those few thin pages were spread before him, a chill shot up his spine, instantly freezing his limbs. The registered and confirmed living members of the Senju clan were fewer than 100. This number, less than 100, also included nearly half who had long since left the battlefield and were frail elders, as well as children who were still young and had not yet graduated from the ninja academy. The actual number of clan ninjas in their prime, capable of fighting, and ready to answer the call to battle at any moment, was fewer than 20. What a joke! Naoki's fingers, clutching the archive papers, trembled slightly from the force. The edges of the papers crumpled. Even a standard ninja squad of genin has more people than you. There are truly only a few left. An indescribable sense of sorrow and absurdity welled up in his heart. Was this the end for the Senju clan, one of the 2 pinnacle clans that founded Konoha? Recalling the original plot, in the later stages, the Senju clan ostensibly had only Tsunade Haim struggling alone, and the Uchiha clan had only Uchiha Sasuke bearing everything. What a pair of unfortunate siblings. At least the Uchiha later gave birth to Sarada, continuing their bloodline, while Tsunade, in the original work, truly lived out her days in solitude. This can't go on. Naoki slammed the archives shut, a resolute glint in his eyes. If he didn't intervene and allowed these remaining clan members to be consumed by the cruel war, the Senju clan would truly be a name in vain, becoming nothing more than a pale record in the history books. He immediately took action, using Orochimaru's and Tsunade's influence in the village, as well as the partial say he had gained due to the value of the secret medicine, to forcefully intervene in the clan's arrangements. All registered Senju clan ninjas, regardless of which squad or department they originally belonged to, were uniformly assigned to Orochimaru's command under the pretext of assisting in secret medicine production and escort to be directly deployed by him. He divided these clan members into two parts. Ninjas with combat capabilities were primarily responsible for two tasks: rotating shifts guarding Orochimaru's laboratory. After all, the current secret medicine was a critical strategic resource for the village, and guarding the secret medicine production base located at the village's edge, converted from old Senju clan property. This place was now one of Konoha's important logistical nodes and could not afford to be lost. As for the non-ninja clan members, including the elders and some women with relevant skills, he arranged them into auxiliary positions at the production base, or, through the Nara clan's channels, into the village's logistics support system, engaging in relatively safe work such as information organization and material sorting. Naoki's goal was clear: to consolidate the existing strength of the Senju clan as much as possible, keep them away from the bloody meat grinder of the front lines, and preserve this last spark. Naoki, won't this be too obvious? Tsunade found him, her brow furrowed with fatigue and worry. Sister, look at this. Naoki didn't explain much, simply pushing the clan member statistics file in front of her. Tsunade silently flipped through it, her face growing paler with each page. She had been out for years, either busy with missions or indulging in gambling, and had become vague about the specific situation of her clan. Now, facing these shocking numbers, she suddenly realized how much the clan had withered. I know this might be overstepping, and some will surely say I'm only looking out for my own interests. Naoki's voice was low and firm, but right now, I can't worry about that. If I don't gather these remaining clan members and protect them, the Senju will truly be gone. Tsunade's eyes dimmed for a moment, then she firmly patted Naoki's shoulder, her voice hoarse. You're doing the right thing. I'll support you in this. With Tsunade's clear support, Naoki's actions met much less resistance. Orochimaru remained noncommittal, but a hint of understanding occasionally flickered in his golden snake-like eyes, seemingly pleased with the outcome. Hiruzen Sarutobi, after hearing the report, pondered for a long time before finally acquiescing to the arrangement. Perhaps in his view, preserving the last bloodline of the Senju and ensuring the absolute safety of Naoki, the source of the secret medicine, also had strategic significance during wartime. As for Danzo, Naoki could imagine the displeasure beneath that gloomy old face, but with Tsunade and Orochimaru's clear support, and the urgent need for stable logistics during the war, he temporarily dared not cause any more trouble. After initially arranging the clan's affairs, Naoki stood alone on the Hokage rock, looking down at the busy, orderly people below. Some of them still had fear of war on their faces, while others felt lost about the future. For now, this is all I can do, Naoki muttered to himself. Intervening with power was merely a stopgap measure. The true hibernation, lying in wait, was to bide his time. He knew that his current self, whether in terms of personal strength or influence within the village, was far from being able to act as he pleased or completely turn the tide. He needed time to grow, he needed stronger power from the system, and he needed to find that opportunity, belonging to the Senju clan and to himself, in this war sweeping across the ninja world. Wait, Naoki's gaze pierced through the base's protective barrier, looking south, towards the land of rain, where the war raged most fiercely. When the time is right, the first thing I'll do is restore the Senju clan to its rightful glory. This thought, like an unextinguished spark, was deeply buried in his heart. He would never allow the clan that founded Konoha to sink into oblivion. The road ahead might be full of thorns, but he had already seen the direction and began to gather strength for it. On the northeastern fringe of Konoha village, the secret medicine R&D and production base was expanded from part of the old Senju clan compound. It had now completely shed its half-research nature. Like a steel titan fully awakened, it was running at full throttle, roaring as it fed the war at the front. This place was the core of Naoki's collaboration with Orochimaru, and one of Konoha's most vital logistical pillars today. 10-odd meters underground, the base had added warning barriers and was guarded around the clock by Anbu under the Hokage's command. They were joined on rotating patrols by route personnel, graciously provided, in truth, sent to spy, by Shimura Danzo. Inside, the originally spacious cavern had been rationally divided into several sturdy, isolated sections. The air was thick with the strange scent of mixed herbs being boiled, and the low hum of machinery, Orochimaru's handiwork, running in the background. Besides the core potion and super potion lines churning at full capacity, other urgently needed wartime materiel began rolling off the lines in bulk. A sealing technique upgraded compressed soldier pill line produced smaller, higher energy rations. Small batches of specially formulated antidotes and hemostatic bandages. Even lightweight armor plates, based on Naoki's hard shell concept and designed by Orochimaru with Naoki's help, were being carefully fitted to the vests of frontline ninja bound for the Land of Rain. The whole base, a precise and efficient war machine under Orochimaru's direction, and the village's coffers, ceaselessly supplied comrades fighting in the blood and mire. At this moment, inside a deliberately cleared open testing ground, Dan Kato, in standard ninja combat dress, stood at the center, every fiber of his being focused. Around him on the ground were 3 interlocking runic bands glowing dark red, forming a triangular barrier 10 meters across. The barrier film was solid and radiated faint heat. "Ready, Dan Ni," Naoki called from outside the array. Orochimaru stood nearby, arms folded, golden snake eyes watching with interest. "Bring it on." Dan drew a deep breath and nodded. Beside the field, Jiraiya laughed. "Then I won't stand on ceremony. Fire release, flame bullet." A blazing sphere a meter across slammed into the dark red film. Boom, flames burst, heat rolled outward. Yet the barrier merely rippled violently, like a lake into which a stone had been cast, layers of ripple spreading, it never broke, steadily blocking every shock and tongue of flame. "Oh, not bad." Jiraiya's brows rose, clearly intrigued. "Wind release, great breakthrough." A fiercer gale hammered down like an invisible mace. The film dented inward, its crimson light flashing rapidly under the huge pressure, but it held firm. Earth release, Earth Dragon Bullet. Water release, Wild Water Wave. 2 more B-rank techniques of different elements followed. The barrier flickered but never fell, shielding Dan inside perfectly. "This barrier's pretty impressive." Jiraiya released the jutsu and clapped his hands. Though he had held back, its defense had still exceeded expectations. A normal A-rank jutsu probably couldn't crack it. A satisfied smile crossed Naoki's face. "Teacher and I developed this defensive sealing barrier specifically to cover the weakness of Dan Senpai's spiritualization technique. Triple blazing array." He pointed to the scroll on the ground, covered in runes. "It uses the caster's chakra as a primer, combining triple resistance to physical impact, energy blast, and mental erosion. As long as the caster's chakra doesn't run dry and the instantaneous attack doesn't exceed its limit, the protection remains constant. This way, Dan Senpai's body is far safer while he's using the spiritualization technique." Dan stepped out of the array, feeling the firm defense, gratitude on his face. "Naoki, Orochimaru, thank you so much. With this barrier I can use the spiritualization technique with real peace of mind." He knew his S-rank kinjutsu was mighty, but once his soul left his body it became extremely vulnerable, his greatest Achilles heel. The appearance of this barrier had largely patched that fatal flaw. Orochimaru spoke hoarsely, indifferent. "The secrets of the spiritualization technique deserve greater protection. This barrier is only the first result." Indeed, it was but one of many preparations Naoki had made over the past 2 years. Driven by his knowledge of the original storyline and the ever-growing unease in his heart, Naoki poured almost all the resources and personal energy he had earned through the secret medicine partnership, during these 2 comparatively calm years, into strengthening the power and survival chances of the people around him. Apart from the publicly known secret medicines and the newly developed barrier, he used the system to quietly prepare deeper gifts for the innermost circle. First he gathered enough materials, successfully redeemed them, localized and improved them, and produced several sets of focus bands, shell bells, and muscle bands. When Tsunade, Orochimaru, Jiraiya, Kato Dan, even Tsukumo Hatake, whose missions had lately overlapped with his enough to become a close ally, received these seemingly ordinary yet miraculously effective, standard issue items, they were all stunned. The focus band's life-saving, lock blood, effect at critical moments, and the shell bell's boost to staying power, meant the world to top ninja who constantly walked the line between life and death. And that was only the foundation. Based on each person's combat style and traits, Naoki painstakingly used the system to craft rarer items tailored to them. He handed Tsunade a black vest that exuded an invisible, heavy aura, as though it swallowed surrounding light. "Big sister, this is for you." Naoki's expression was grave. "It's called the assault vest. it greatly increases your resistance to ninjutsu impact, especially genjutsu and some yin release attacks. However, it seems to amplify the wearer's offensive drive, making you favor attack over defense in battle. Tsunade took the vest. It felt slightly heavy, and she could clearly sense the strange power within. As a top medical ninja and taijutsu master, she instantly grasped the item's value. For someone used to shattering everything with Machamp-level strength, greater defense and an even fiercer offensive bent were a perfect match. She rubbed Naoki's hair hard, eyes full of pride. "Brat, you put thought into this." For Orochimaru, he chose a pale, ice-cold, razor-sharp fang-shaped pendant, Dragon Fang. "Sensei, this might strengthen your snake ninjutsu or powers related to Ruchi Cave." Naoki phrased it tactfully. Orochimaru took the Dragon Fang. His golden vertical pupils contracted sharply as he felt the refined, ancient energy ripple inside the tooth, resonating faintly with his summoning beasts. He licked his lips, showing a rare, purely delighted smile. "I like this gift." For Jiraiya, Naoki picked a health amulet, carved from unknown wood, exuding a gentle life force aura. "Big bro Jiraiya, keep this on you. May it help you dodge fewer enemy cheap shots," Naoki quipped, tossing the amulet over. Jiraiya caught it and immediately felt a cool, peaceful aura circulate through his body, his mind even clearing a bit. Though easygoing, he knew what avoiding status effects meant, especially against bizarre jutsu or poisons. He solemnly tucked the amulet away and, uncharacteristically serious, said, "Thanks, kid." As for Naoki himself, he was already armed to the teeth. Focus Band Modified Konoha Forehead Protector, Miracle Seed worn close, shell belt hung at his waist and muscle bands were his default setup. Depending on the battle, he could swap in other unlocked items, like Hardstone to boost rock-type moves, Quick Powder for speed, and so on. The Express Share operated silently, greedily absorbing combat experience and insight from the 5 bound partners. He called up a personal status screen only he could see, sweeping his gaze over the already dazzling stats. Trainer, Pokemon, Senju Naoki. Energy, 110,546. Rank, Special Jonin of the First Realm. Element Training, Wind Flying 4%, Earth 3%, Water 6%, Rock 8%. Fusion Progress, Water Earth 11.5%, Grass Poison 6.7%, Earth Rock 4%. Reading the panel, feeling the power growing within, and looking at the base he had turned into a war fortress and refuge for friends and family, Naoki drew a deep breath of air laced with herbs and metal. The war had arrived. All he could do was build the strongest possible line of defense within the storm, for himself and for the people who mattered. The successful test of the three-wheel blazing array allowed Kato-dan to finally set his mind at ease. The greatest weakness of the spirit transformation technique, which had troubled him for a long time, was finally effectively remedied. It was foreseeable that whenever he needed to use this S-rank forbidden jutsu in the future, he would only need to casually toss the large, specially crafted sealing scroll from his back onto the ground, perform the necessary hand seals, and instantly be enveloped by the protection of this sturdy, dark red barrier. He no longer had to completely rely on his teammates' desperate protection for his own safety, especially on the ever-changing, perilous battlefield. The psychological burden stemming from that uncertainty was now immensely relieved. With this, I finally won't have to worry about my physical body becoming a liability to the team when I use the spirit transformation technique. Kato-dan gently stroked the massive scroll on his back, his tone conveying palpable relief and gratitude. He could even imagine the expressions of profound relief on the faces of his former bodyguards when they saw this defensive barrier. After all, the pressure of guarding a completely defenseless target was no less taxing than facing the enemy directly. Naoki watched from the side, feeling quite satisfied himself. In his mind, anyone who carried such an exaggeratedly large scroll on their back was undoubtedly a formidable figure. His grandfather, the first Hokage Hashirama Senju, used a single sealing scroll to sweep away entire armies. The pervy sage, Jiraiya, unfurls a scroll to summon the entire legion of frogs from Mount Myoboku. Now, with Kato-dan equipped with the three-wheel blazing array scroll, setting everything else aside, his appearance and presence were instantly maximized, giving him the air of a hidden master. When facing enemies, this allowed him to seize the psychological advantage, greatly improving his survival rate and tactical initiative. After the test concluded, the atmosphere within the base noticeably grew heavier. Early tomorrow morning, Tsunade, Jiraiya, Orochimaru, Kato Dan, and others would officially depart for the front lines in the Land of Rain, serving as part of the first wave of elite reinforcements. There, the conflict against the Rain Ninja led by Hanzo and the menacing Stone Ninja had already escalated into a brutal war of attrition, where familiar comrades could fall at any moment. As for Naoki, he also received his mission assignment. Instead of being directly assigned to a combat unit, he was appointed as the captain of a logistics and support squad. His primary responsibilities included transporting supplies between the rear base and the forward outposts, providing preliminary treatment and evacuation for the wounded, and ensuring the smooth flow of the rear supply lines. A logistics squad. Naoki looked at the deployment order in his hand, his gaze calm and showing little surprise. Given his public status as an important heir of the Senju clan, and a core member of secret medicine development, the village elders, especially Hiruzen Sarutobi, would never easily allow him to step onto the most dangerous front lines. Assigning him to logistics was both a form of protection and a relatively safe way to utilize his skills. After all, no one understood the properties and distribution of those secret medicines better than he did. But this did not mean absolute safety. War was an all-consuming beast, and supply lines were always prime targets for enemy raids and sabotage. Ambushed transport teams and infiltrated, destroyed rear supply depots were common occurrences in every major war. If they were unlucky enough to encounter elite enemy assault troops, or if the front line collapsed and the fighting spread to the rear base, that so-called relative safety would vanish in an instant. When the nest is overturned, no egg remains intact. Naoki understood this principle perfectly. However, deep within him, instead of fear, an irresistible eagerness surged. He had never relaxed his training over the past 2 years. His Senju physique, combined with the rigorous training from the system's techniques, had steadily increased his fundamental strength. But what truly made him feel like he was growing at an astonishing speed was the learning device that operated silently at all times. Through those 5 invisible connections, Orochimaru's cunning and precision, Jiraiya's sheer power and versatility, Tsunade's ferocity, Kato Dan's insights into the soul-based nature of the spirit transformation technique, and Tsukumo Hataki's masterful swordsmanship and combat intuition. Vast amounts of practical combat experience, mastery of jutsu application, and even profound insights into life and death, all derived from these top-tier experts, continuously flowed into the depths of his consciousness like a steady stream. Although this couldn't directly increase his chakra reserves, it greatly broadened his horizons and optimized his combat thinking. It allowed his control and application of his own power to reach a level far beyond his peers, surpassing even many veteran ninja. He felt like a constantly inflating balloon, his accumulated power waiting for an outlet to be released and tested. Naoki could no longer hold back his anticipation for the real battlefield. A logistics squad. Perfect. He had too many ideas that needed to be put into practice and adjusted within a real war environment. Whether it was field testing new techniques, cautiously experimenting with his energy absorption ability, or using his logistics status to gather more specialized materials, the vast, chaotic battlefield might actually be his best stage. Night fell, and the base was brightly lit as final preparations were made for the next day's departure. Naoki gathered his squad members to introduce themselves. The team composition was quite decent. Hizashi Hyuga LV. Chunin. Pokemon. Hizashi Hyuga. Realm. First Stage Chunin. Energy Chakra. 18,108. Akaku Yumino LV. Chunin. Pokemon. Akaku Yumino. Realm. First Stage Chunin. Energy Chakra. 13,800. Kairi Kirishima LV. Genin. Pokemon. Kairi Kirishima. Realm. First Stage Genin. Energy Chakra. 8,833. After making all the arrangements, he returned to his room in the base to conduct a final inventory of his gear. His ninja pouch contained the full standard loadout, kunai, shuriken, explosive tags, wire, smoke bombs, all of which were specially enhanced. Several sealing scrolls held categorized stashes of various potions, super potions, and a small quantity of life-saving, hyper potions, along with backup pieces of the various system items he used. The red focus band Leaf Village forehead protector was on his brow, the miracle seed was on his chest, the shell bell was at his waist, and the thick boots were securely on his feet. In his mental world, the marks of Venusaur and Gengar floated, radiating powerful energy fluctuations. He checked his personal information panel one last time, his gaze lingering briefly on the elaborate skill list and the 2 volts individual values, before slowly dismissing the screen. That should be everything, Nawaki murmured to himself, pushed open the door, and stepped out onto the veranda. The night wind blew, carrying the chilling aura of distant conflict. A sense of impending storm and oppression mingled with the restless anticipation of boiling blood, intertwining within his chest. The temporary logistics outpost Konoha had set up inside Rain Country felt far tenser and harsher than life back in the village. The air reeked of wet earth, faint blood, and a constant, edgy readiness for slaughter. After weeks of missions and friction, Nawaki's supply squad had finally clicked. The youngest commander anyone had seen, he won respect through composure beyond his years, pinpoint control of supplies, and calm orders in several skirmishes. The team's makeup had clearly been crafted. Nawaki was sure teacher Orochimaru had a hand in it. Hyuga Hazashi, elite of the branch family, carried the Byakugan that could map meridians and detect obstacles, an early warning system in this kill zone, priceless beyond measure. Steady and older than his age, Hazashi rarely wasted emotion and always gave the coldest, clearest verdict at crunch time. The other 2, Yumino Akaku and Kirishima Kairi, were pleasant surprises. Both had graduated years earlier, seasoned genin with rock-solid basics. Akaku leaned toward fire release and taijutsu, resilient and calm. Kairi specialized in water release and sealing, meticulous and superb at support. Nawaki joked to himself that, compared with the ordinary-looking Uruka-sensei of later years, Akaku the father was leagues stronger, classic case of tiger father, dog son. He had also noticed something unusual between Akaku and Kairi. Childhood friends raised side by side, they moved in perfect sync. In lulls between missions they traded silent glances. One look told Akaku exactly where a trap would bite hardest. A flick of Kairi's fingers let her cloak his flames with water for cover or concealment. That wordless duet made their tactics brutally efficient and saved their captain countless headaches. Each of the 3 could match an average chunin. With the war's workload, promotion was only a matter of merit. A squad boasting scouting, assault and support assigned to supply escort was sheer luxury. Right now they ghosted through Rain's border woods, dense and sodden. Their job: ferry urgent medical packs and some ninja tools from the forward depot to a hidden outpost on the front's flank. Rain Country had become the great power's private arena. Hanzo the maniac seemed bent on hastening his nation's doom, locking the fighting inside his borders and dragging Konoha, Iwagakure and Sunagakur into a free-for-all on his ravaged soil. Nawaki's team didn't haul bulk supplies, they shuttled priority items requested in real time by scattered posts. Where, when, and how were all set by logistics, only execution was theirs. Skirting the front's edge meant frequent brushes with enemy infiltrators and scouts. Thanks to the squad's skill and Hazashi's Byakugan that could spot almost any ambush, earlier brushes ended with nothing worse than frayed nerves. Most contacts were run-of-the-mill scouts or stragglers, and under Nawaki's shamelessly crafty tactics the team's kill-death ratio soared. Stop. Up front, Hyuga Hazashi, maintaining low-level Byakugan, suddenly lifted a fist and whispered the warning. Veins around his pale eyes bulged like twisting dragons, the pupils' penetration sharpening in a blink. Hazashi's moves were always crisp, nothing wasted, steeped in the Hyuga clan's discipline. 4 chakra signatures, 1 kilometer ahead, 4-man cell. His voice stayed calm and clipped. Their path overlaps ours. Likely enemy scouts. Showtime. Nawaki's eyes hardened. Without hesitation he snapped off rapid hand signs. Standard order. Rain Country dehumidifier feast. Extra spicy, add chili for Akaku. Kairi, brew the tea. Hazashi, wait tables in the private room. Don't help the guests to their seats till I serve the last dish. Sir, the 3 murmured, melting like ghosts into trees and shadow, swift, practiced, flawless. Kirishima Kairi's fingers danced, her special sealing papers clinging to damp trunks and earth as unnatural mist began to gather. While she laid the trap, Yumino Akaku, without even a confirming glance, linked fire-triggered exploding tags in the adjacent zone, their ranges meshing perfectly. He buried tandem tags under brush and leaf litter, setting chakra focal points for fire release ignition. Mid-task he still flicked a look toward Kairi, checking her position was safe. Hyuga Hazashi leapt into a dense canopy, Byakugan locked on the 4 distant chakra blips, feeding constant range and bearing corrections. Nawaki drew a deep breath, sinking his mind inward to touch the dark, eerie seal. Art. Shadow stealth strike. His body lost substance like ink in water, silently slipping into the heavy tree shadow beneath him. The world turned blurred and warped, yet he could still sense light, shadow and chakra ripples beyond the veil. A viper coiled in the shadow dimension, he waited for the perfect instant to fatally greet his prey. The woods seemed calm once more, only wind rustled leaves and distant, half-muffled booms, thunder or explosions, rolling on the horizon. The damp air felt frozen, invisible killing intent quietly soaked the ordinary-looking path. Buried in utter darkness, Naoki sensed his chakra pulsing a fraction faster. Unknown scouts, unknown strength, no fear, only cold, hunting focus. Amidst the damp woodland, killing intent suddenly erupted. Boom, rumble, following the precise detonation of the explosive tags by Yumi no Akaku, fierce flames and smoke instantly engulfed the 4 enemy scouts who had just stepped into the trap zone. An Iowa Scout squad has appeared. Iowa Scout Diamond Suit LV. Chunin. 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 4 shinobi from Iwagakure, all Chunin. Splintered wood and dirt flew everywhere, and sharp screams tore through the brief silence. One Iowa shinobi, unable to dodge in time, was instantly blasted into a bloody mess, collapsing and clearly losing the ability to fight. Now, Naoki emerged from the shadows, forming a strange hand seal with both hands, the dark Gengar-affiliated chakra surging within him. Technique. Strange light. A fist-sized orb of light, radiating a dazzling, multicolored glow, appeared from his palm. Seemingly slow, yet incredibly swift, it wobbled and floated towards the enemy position shrouded in smoke. Naoki even lowered his voice and provided a sound effect with a mischievous smile. Here comes the little flying stick tilde. The orb, like a sentient ghost, accurately floated between the 3 remaining stunned Iowa shinobi and suddenly burst into a dazzling and bizarre halo of light. Ah! Close your eyes quickly. What's happening? It's a genjutsu. Enveloped by the halo, the movements of all 4 Iowa shinobi, including the fastest reacting captain who was attempting to form a hand seal, instantly froze. They felt the world spinning violently, their vision twisting and overlapping, as an intense wave of dizziness overwhelmed their senses. They even seemed to hear the chirping of birds, an auditory hallucination, making it extremely difficult to remain steady, causing them to stagger like drunks. A perfect chance. Fire release. Flame bullet. Yumi no Akaku wouldn't miss such an opportunity. Already prepared, he immediately spat out a scorching fireball, aiming straight for the 3 staggering figures. Earth release. Earth flow wall. The Iowa captain suppressed his severe dizziness and nausea, slamming his hands onto the ground. A moderately thick earth wall barely managed to rise, blocking most of the flames. However, due to his erratic chakra flow and confused state, he was jolted backward by the residual blast, coincidentally separating himself from his 2 teammates who were still spinning in place. Quick attack. Naoki, who had been waiting for this moment, flashed past like a specter, the kunai in his hand flashing with cold light, precisely slicing across the throat of one of the confused Iowa shinobi. Critical hit. The man collapsed softly, his face filled with confusion and dizziness, without even seeing where the attack came from. 2 members instantly down. The situation was now 4 against 2, and the enemy captain was in terrible condition. 8 trigrams palms. Hyuga Hazashi silently appeared behind the Iowa captain who had just managed to steady himself, delivering gentle fist strikes like a sudden downpour. The captain's chakra and perception were already disrupted by the strange light, making it impossible for him to fend off Hazashi's precise and rapid assault. Within a few short breaths, multiple chakra points on his body were invaded, and his chakra flow was completely sealed. He could only let out a muffled groan before slumping to the ground, losing all ability to resist. The last Iowa shinobi, still dizzy and disoriented in place, was easily subdued by the perfectly coordinated Yumi no Akaku and Kirishima Kairi. The battle, from start to finish, lasted only 2 or 3 minutes. Naoki's squad completely wiped out, 2 killed, 1 severely injured, 1 captured, a 4-man Iowa Scout team with 0 casualties. The Iowa Scout squad has fallen. Venusaur and Gengar have gained experience points. Venusaur LV, 44 plus 310, Gengar LV, 42 plus 298. You have defeated the Iowa squad. Who? Hazashi deactivated his Byakugan and instinctively rubbed his eyes, which felt sore and were slightly watering with physiological tears. His Byakugan provided extreme insight, but in order to precisely track the confused enemies, he had inevitably caught some residual light from the strange light, leaving his eyes quite uncomfortable now. Naoki walked over, saw Hazashi's slightly red eyes and the dampness at the corners, and couldn't help but complain. I told you, Hazashi, stop staring at the light. Hazashi wiped the corner of his eye with resignation, maintaining his usual composure. Captain, this genjutsu of yours has extremely strong control and is hard to guard against. However, it seems prone to hitting friend and foe alike. Kirishima Kairi, standing nearby, kicked a stone glumly and muttered softly, I feel like I barely participated. Right after the traps went off, Captain, you controlled them, then Ikaku and Hazashi attacked. I didn't get to do anything. Yumino Ikaku put away his kunai, gave a hearty smile, and patted her shoulder reassuringly. It's all right, Kairi. Your trap placement was perfect, it restricted their movement. Ending the fight quickly is what matters most. He looked at Naoki, genuine admiration in his eyes. Captain, the genjutsu you developed is truly incredible. Naoki proudly lifted his chin, a man of taste. Ikaku, to be honest, I'm currently figuring out how to seal this kind of special ninjutsu into scrolls. Once successful, you and Kairi will be the first to get a few. When you encounter enemies, just throw out a strange light scroll and blind those dogs. He thought to himself. In the original story, Jiraiya could even seal Amaterasu, there's no reason his strange light shouldn't work. He fully intended to promote this insidious fighting style, extending the Orange Island's Devil approach to the shinobi battlefield. Next, Naoki turned back to Hazashi and added with a mischievous grin, as for the friend or foe issue, we'll try a different tactic next time. I have another wind release soundwave genjutsu. You can choose whether you want to cover your eyes or your ears then. The corner of Hazashi's mouth twitched slightly. He didn't reply, simply turning his head away silently. After the joking ended, Naoki's expression grew serious. He first instructed Kirishima Kairi. Kairi, use the sealing scrolls to secure the two dead Iwa shinobi. The bodies must be taken back and handed over to the intelligence division, they might be able to analyze useful information. Yes, Captain. Kirishima Kairi immediately got to work, taking out the sealing scrolls and beginning the process. Naoki then walked over to the severely injured, dying Iwa shinobi, and the Iwa captain whose chakra had been sealed by Hazashi and who was now glaring at them with venomous eyes. Konoha brats, may you all die terrible deaths. The heavily injured Iwa shinobi cursed with difficulty. The captured captain gritted his teeth even harder. Iwagakure won't let you get away with this. The Tsuchikage-sama will surely avenge us. Naoki paid no attention to the curses, beginning to form hand seals. His movements were complex and ancient, carrying an eerie aura unlike ordinary sealing jutsu. Chakra condensed at his fingertips, forming dark runes. Evil sealing method, modified. He gave a low shout, pressing his hands onto the captives' abdomens, the core chakra regions. The dark runes burrowed into their bodies like living things. They didn't just block the chakra flow, they carried a hidden power of absorption. To outsiders, this merely looked like Naoki performing a special, more potent sealing jutsu that completely neutralized the enemy's fighting capability. But only Naoki knew that the core of this modified sealing jutsu was the ability of energy absorption. Even if someone managed to unlock the surface seal in the future, the core chakra source would have been permanently absorbed and destroyed. Even if they survived, they would never be able to exist as a shinobi again. As the sealing was completed, the cold system prompt sounded in Naoki's mind as expected. Energy absorption successful. Acquired. Wind, flying, attribute energy source 2%, earth attribute energy source 3%. With a thought, the status screen visible only to him appeared. Trainer. Pokemon. Senju Naoki. Energy. 125,632. Realm. First stage, Tokubetsu Jonin. Energy absorption. Wind, flying, 7%, earth 9%, water 13%, rock 11%. Fusion progress. Water, earth 15%, grass, poison 13%, earth, rock 11%. Feeling the slight increase in energy within him and the rise in the mark level, Naoki nodded in satisfaction. Not bad, not bad, he clapped his hands and said cheerfully, thanks to the Iwa family members for the experience and energy. I definitely have to give you a 5-star review. The rain continued to fall, gradually washing away the scent of blood in the woods. But for Naoki, this small skirmish was merely the beginning of his journey to absorb nourishment and rapidly grow on this cruel battlefield. Naoki's squad quickly cleared the traces of the battle. Kairi Kirishima skillfully used a sealing scroll to handle the bodies of the fallen stone ninja, while Akaku Yumino vigilantly patrolled the surroundings, and Hiyashi Hyuga's Byakugan remained activated, ensuring no new threats approached. Naoki stood still, seemingly on guard, but his mind was completely immersed in the mysterious system panel within him. Looking at the charging progress, which was almost agonizingly slow, Naoki felt little frustration. Instead, he had a clear understanding, as if he had glimpsed the profound secrets of his path forward. Through multiple battles and the gradual unlocking of system information, he gained an increasingly clear understanding of his unique path to strength. The core of this path lay in attribute fusion. The dazzling array of attributes on the system panel. Water, earth, wind, flight, rock, grass, poison, ghost, normal, yang, and even more unactivated gray options, were not mere labels but the foundational elements of his chakra's essence, leading to the pinnacle of power. The rules were simple and brutal. Charging a single attribute to 100% meant he would completely master the ultimate chakra nature transformation of that attribute. At that point, with every gesture, water style could cut through iron and gold, earth style could be as firm as a rock, and wind style as sharp as a divine weapon. With the Senju clan's vast chakra reserves, once achieved, his power level would steadily reach the Jonin tier, possibly even approaching elite Jonin. This was a tangible, short-term goal for him. Charging two different attributes to 100% satisfied the basic requirement for a qualitative change. The collision and fusion of ultimate nature transformations would give birth to a new power, a Kekkei Genkei. Once any set of fused attributes, such as water, earth, grass, poison, reached 100% fusion, it meant he officially possessed the stepping stone to becoming a cage-level powerhouse. Just like the fifth Mizukage, Maid Terumi, in the original story, who possessed both lava release and boil release Kekkei Genkei, she was considered exceptional even among cage-level shinobi. However, two attribute fusions still fell within the scope of Kekkei Genkei. Even if he fused more attribute combinations in the future, his tier would still be cage level. It simply meant his chakra reserves, ninjutsu combinations, and tactical diversity would far surpass ordinary cage level shinobi, and his foundation would be much deeper. To glimpse beyond cage level, he had to take an even more difficult step, fusing three attributes to develop a Kekkei Tota, which transcended Kekkei Genkei. Naoki yearned for the terrifying power of dust release, but the accumulation required for it was immense. This is simply a bottomless pit. Naoki inwardly observed the slowly increasing fusion progress bars, a wry smile appearing on his lips. He keenly realized an even more liver-aching reality. Taking water, earth, fusion as an example, it wasn't simply a matter of putting already 100% charged water and earth attributes together for them to automatically fuse. Once both attributes reached their maximum, a new fusion progress bar would appear between them. The energy required for this fusion process was even greater than that needed for charging a single attribute. Only when the fusion progress reached 100% would he truly master the water-earth Kekkei Genkei. And that's not all. Naoki seemed to see an abyss of infinite nesting dolls. Once two attribute fusion succeeds, to proceed to three attribute fusion and develop a Kekkei Tota, a third attribute needs to be added to the existing fusion. For example, the wind attribute. Then, the wind attribute would need to be charged from scratch to 100%, and at the same time, the previously fused water and earth or the resulting Kekkei Genkei foundation would very likely need to be recharged to meet the more stringent energy requirements of 3 attribute fusion, and so on for 4 attribute, 5 attribute fusion, and so forth. This meant that if he wanted to fuse all 18 basic attributes on the system panel, plus any potentially hidden special attributes, he would have to go through endless rounds of charging. How long will I have to grind for this? Naoki deeply doubted whether draining all the chakra from every ninja in the entire shinobi world would be enough to fill this deep pit. If he continued like this, he would probably become a mad killer. Fortunately, self-training could also increase energy progress, albeit much slower. Perhaps finding items similar to the Hashirama's necklace that contained considerable energy was also a method. The system's devouring function was like directly stripping away one's essence, similar to the demonic cultivators in cultivation worlds. Chakra attributes were like spirit roots, Anyone whose chakra attributes were devoured would have all their existing chakra attributes absorbed and added to Nawaki, though in very small amounts. But to go from nothing to something, from not possessing to being able to possess, this was already a heaven-defying miracle. Time to work hard and grind. The process of leveling up and seeing himself gradually grow stronger was also very satisfying. The system gave Nawaki the opportunity to embark on the path of the strongest, but the effort he needed to put in did not decrease. Fortunately, the path ahead was clear, and he just needed to follow the navigation. Time to work hard and grind. Nawaki took a deep breath, suppressing the distracting thoughts in his mind. Watching himself grow stronger bit by bit, and his attributes gradually charge, this process, full of anticipation and a sense of accomplishment, was intoxicating in itself. Captain, the battlefield has been cleared. No tracking traces found. Hiyashi Hyuga's voice pulled Nawaki's thoughts back to reality, and the white glow in his eyes slowly receded. Good, well done. Nawaki nodded, his gaze sweeping over his three teammates. Although Akaku Yumino and Kairi Kirishima had just been in a battle, their breathing was steady and their eyes sharp, clearly maintaining good condition, and Hiyashi was as composed as ever. This squad had become one of his most reliable supports on this brutal battlefield. Replenish your stamina, then we'll continue to the outpost. Nawaki ordered, simultaneously taking out several Pokemon sandwiches and fresh water from a ceiling scroll and handing them to everyone. He himself sat against a large tree, seemingly resting his eyes, but in reality, he continued to sort out his own power system. A single attribute charged to 100% means Jonin level. My water attribute is currently the highest at 13%, followed by earth, rock, and wind flight. At this rate, even with training and occasional devouring supplements, achieving this on a perilous battlefield will be no easy feat. The shadow of war hung over him like the sword of Damocles. After his grandmother Mito's passing, he had one less layer of protection to rely on. His sister Tsunade and teacher Orochimaru were currently on the front lines, spearheading assaults, and could encounter misfortune at any moment. Strength. I must possess sufficient strength. Nawaki roared inwardly. He once again clarified his short-term goal. To charge at least one attribute to 100% in the shortest possible time. Only then could he possess stronger self-preservation abilities and better protect those around him in this chaotic situation. He might even try to change some outcomes he didn't want to see. The road was long and required a lot of grinding, but he had seen the direction and was prepared to persevere and forge ahead. The war in the Land of Rain was like a pot of porridge utterly muddied by the insane agitator, Hanzo the Salamander. There was no overwhelming tide of steel, nor was there comprehensive long-range firepower. This war, situated between the ages of cold and hot weaponry, was characterized more by the silent skirmishes of scouts, the repeated changing of hands of strongholds, and the endless cycle of ambushes and counter-ambushes along marching routes. On the map, the spheres of influence belonging to Konoha, Iwagakure, and Sunagakure were intricately intertwined. The small flags marking the enemy and our positions might be planted in one spot today, only to be pulled out and replaced with another faction's color tomorrow. Relying on his familiarity with the terrain and the madness of having nothing to lose, Hanzo stubbornly dragged the two great nations into a brutal war of attrition on his own soil, turning the entire Land of Rain into a massive, life-consuming meat grinder. The pressure on Nawaki's logistics base, one of the nodes supporting the front line's operations, was increasing daily. Not only was the transfer of supplies becoming heavier, but more and more enemy prisoners were being sent here for temporary detention, causing management costs and risks to soar. That day, Nawaki's squad had just completed a supply delivery mission when a messenger led them to a tent outside the center of the logistics area. Pushing aside the heavy waterproof canvas flap, the interior light was dim, and the air was thick with the mixed scent of maps, ink, and faint medicinal herbs. Kaharu Udatane was hunched over a simple wooden table covered in maps, her brow furrowed, her finger emphatically tapping a location representing the Eastern Front. Advisor Udatane. Nawaki and the others entered the tent. Kaharu Udatane looked up, her face showing the fatigue of long-term sleep deprivation, but her gaze remained sharp. Her eyes rested on Nawaki for a moment before she cut straight to the point. Nawaki, your squad's next mission has changed. Oh, Nawaki's tone was calm, but several thoughts flashed through his mind instantly. A mission change. At this critical juncture, was this normal scheduling, or, on the Eastern Front, Sunagaku's offensive is extremely aggressive, especially the various poisons they habitually use, which are causing a significant trouble. Kaharu Udatane's voice carried a hint of gravity. The consumption rate of antidotes on the front lines is far exceeding expectations. Headquarters has decided to transfer your squad to the Eastern Front to reinforce logistics support there, particularly the preparation and production of antidotes. She paused, glancing over Nawaki and the squad members behind him, then added, "Furthermore, the number of Omegakure and Iwagakure scouts captured here at the base is excessive, posing a security risk. A portion needs to be escorted away and handed over to the Intelligence Division for interrogation. You will be traveling together, which works out because..." Her gaze settled on Nawaki, carrying a subtle scrutiny. "It just so happens that the sealing jutsu you use is particularly effective. Those sealed essentially lose the ability to resist. This will greatly reduce the risk during transport. Kiryoka Kairi also has a foundation in sealing jutsu and can assist. This mission is very suitable for your team. Transfer to the Eastern Front. Antidote support. Escorting prisoners." Nawaki's mind raced. He knew that Orochimaru-sensei was on the Eastern Front, and the commander there should currently be Tsukumo Hatake. Could Danzo also be on the Eastern Front? Was this his doing? Considering how Nawaki had essentially blown himself up in front of Orochimaru in the original storyline, he had to be extremely cautious. The backlog of prisoners at the logistics base was a fact, and the severity of Suna's poison threat on the Eastern Front was also reasonable. Deploying him for support made sense both publicly and privately. Most importantly, Orochimaru-sensei was indeed at the Eastern Front command post. With his teacher there, even if Danzo wanted to pull strings, he would have to think twice. And prisoners. For him, this was nourishment, delivered right to his doorstep. "Understood. I guarantee mission completion." Nawaki suppressed his thoughts, straightened his back, and responded, displaying an age-appropriate mix of excitement and determination at being entrusted with a major task. "We will ensure the safe delivery of both supplies and prisoners to the Eastern Front." Kaharu Udatane nodded, seemingly satisfied with Nawaki's response. "Very good. The specific escort list and route map will be handed to you shortly. You have 1 day to prepare, primarily to handle the sealing of those prisoners to ensure nothing goes wrong." Understood. After leaving the tent, Nawaki immediately led his squad to the temporary prisoner containment area. In the dark, damp, makeshift tents, over 40 Omegakure and Iwagakure prisoners were held, most of whom had been captured in previous scout skirmishes. Their eyes were either fierce, numb, or despairing. Seeing Nawaki and the others enter immediately caused a subtle stir. "Let's begin." Nawaki signaled to Hazashi and Yumino Akaku. The two immediately guarded the entrance and exit, maintaining vigilance. Kiryoka Kairi stood by Nawaki's side, ready to assist if necessary. Nawaki walked up to the first cell, which held a Suna shinobi with defiant eyes. He wasted no time. His hands immediately formed seals, and as chakra surged, dark runes coalesced at his fingertips. Evil sealing method. Modified. The moment his palm pressed against the Suna shinobi's abdomen, Nawaki distinctly felt a faint stream of primordial energy, tinged with the scent of wind and sand, being forcibly stripped away and channeled through his arm into his internal system. Simultaneously, a prompt sounded that only he could hear. Energy absorption successful. Obtained. Wind flight elemental energy source 1%, Earth elemental energy source 0.5%. The defiance in the Suna shinobi's eyes was instantly replaced by immense pain and weakness. His body convulsed violently, then he slumped down as if his spine had been removed, his breathing becoming extremely shallow, making it difficult even to lift a finger. Nawaki's expression remained unchanged as he walked toward the next prisoner. Energy absorption successful. Obtained. Earth elemental energy source 2%, Water elemental energy source 0.8%. Energy absorption successful. Obtained. Wind flight elemental energy source 1.5%, Fire elemental energy source 0.3%. Energy absorption successful. Obtained. Earth elemental energy source 1.8%, Rock elemental energy source 1.2%. Cold system prompts rang out one after another in his mind, like the most beautiful symphony. He was like a diligent gardener, silently cultivating this ground filled with nourishment. On the status panel, the numbers representing charging progress were slowly and steadily ticking upward at a rate barely perceptible to the naked eye. Wind flight element charge. 7% right pointing arrow, 8% right pointing arrow, 9%. Earth element charge, 9% right pointing arrow 10% right pointing arrow 11%. Water element charge, 13% right pointing arrow 13.5%. Rock element charge, 11% right pointing arrow 12%. Nawaki, processed, each prisoner with precision and efficiency. When the last Iwa shinobi slumped to the ground beneath the dark runes, Nawaki slowly withdrew his hand and let out a long breath. He felt a distinct, slight increase in power within his body, along with the minor boosts to the elemental charging progress on his system panel.
Thanks for watching my video. Please like and share it.